the link.
Right. Oh, brilliant, Tom. Thank you. That's
So,
good.
which link should I send to them, or do they already have it?
So
No,
delegates
we're gonna have to
need
send a new. You're gonna have to send a new YouTube link, which I'll get for you now.
Just copy it from the top.
Got it.
Also, just a reminder, if everyone can have, if they've got Facebook open on like your laptop or whatever, remember to close it down just so you don't get the notification noise.
Emily, do you want me to send the YouTube link to chairs as well? I've only sent them the Zoom link. For
I mean, they can have the YouTube link as well, actually, yeah. If they want to watch the panel and stuff, they might do.
Okay.
But yeah, they'll need to join the Zoom link after that.
Do you want me to disable the live chat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fab.
Yeah, please.
I
hope people will be able to join. It's worried me now. But I guess that's what
check the Can someone go on the stream and check the live stream and check it's working at the right rates?
It is working. Yeah, it is on.
Is it going a bit slow? Because I got a really grumpy message from YouTube saying it's operating at a lower bit rate.
Okay.
Whatever the fuck that means.
No, it's working just as it was yesterday. Same kind of pace, it seems like.
All right, fab. Okay then, stream setup.
Okay. Just a couple of points I wanted to run through. Is that Anya and Barry will be hosting this, so the panel event and then the workshop. So panel will be 3 till 4. Workshops will be, hold on, it's going to stop playing. Workshops will be 4 till 5:40. Then the closing ceremony will start at 5:40, which will be opened by Louisa and Safa, who will then introduce the chairs who will give closing speeches and award prizes to delegates and stuff. Then I'll give a closing speech. When you're not speaking, can you have your camera off and remain muted? And then also, can people consider some questions as well in case there aren't enough from delegates?
Okay.
Just like throughout the panel and the workshops. Hopefully we'll be fine, but just in case, it's good to do that.
Barry and Anya, are your speakers, what time have you told them to turn up?
I've told all the speakers to join like 5 minutes before their session starts and keep their video and microphone turned off. So they should be joining any minute now.
Really?
Okay, perfect.
And there's anyways like a 5-minute period break between the workshops at least.
Okay, fabulous. I'm just going to run off to the toilet, but I'll be back in a second.
Has everyone had time for lunch and everything?
I just sent my brother off to uni like 15 minutes ago, so yeah, he's gone. So
oh my goodness,
emotional, yeah.
Yeah. Was it first year?
Yeah. So he's my little brother. So it's his first year. He's all like bright and peppy, going off to Birmingham. So
wow.
Yeah.
What's he studying?
And neuroscience.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Fancy.
Okay.
All right, gents. Altogether, success so far?
I'm quite sure, Tom, you've had the worst time amongst all of us.
I think yours was the worst by the sound of it.
My fucking God. I like, they just kept on like coming back and forth, and there was no real way to predict who was going to be on the call and who wasn't. No, they were good.
Was today a bit better?
Pardon?
Was today a bit better than yesterday?
Sharing wise, it was still a bit problematic. Delegate wise, it was all right. The morning started off very smooth, but I think we started running out of steam because I mean, like we had 8 delegates for fuck's sake. Like it was never going to run properly because, half half of our assigned people.
Oh, Tom, remember to pin the speaker as well.
Oh, shit.
Just so it's not on gallery view.
I just realised I'm live streaming all this.
I had like a screen to share which said panel event starts shortly, so that we wouldn't be doing this again. I'm not sure that would work since I'm not.
Have we sent the links out, by the way? Because it just says 3 people are watching this at the moment.
Yeah, Safa, have you managed to send the YouTube live stream link out?
So I am sending, to most people I've sent it out. I assume most people haven't joined because it's not 3 p.m. yet. But yeah, most people should have it now. I'm just sending it to a couple of others.
Okay, brilliant.
Oh,
we're nearly there.
last push.
Did you do any more icebreakers then today? Any more kind of games?
We didn't. We did get a panel event. We did get a not panel. We got a confession box going.
Okay, good.
But mostly just asking people for their Instagrams.
Oh,
Someone's a big fan of my accent though, which I'll take I'll take that as a W right there. How's your brother?
Oh, he just got. I sent him off like 15 minutes ago, so still a bit raw.
Where's he going off to?
Birmingham, University of Birmingham.
To study what?
Neuroscience.
Shit.
Yeah, just in a completely different direction.
Yeah, that is fancy.
I know, it makes me look so stupid. But yeah, he just just waved him off. So.
Oh, that's nice.
How old is he?
How old is he?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I have 18. He's a year younger, so 18. Yeah.
I like how you had to pause to think.
I really did have to think.
Shit, how old is he? I'm not sure.
I still think he's like 16, and then he has to remind me that he's not.
I mean, to be fair, I don't remember my sister's age at all. I think she's 17 or 18, but it's just really difficult to tell nowadays.
Isn't it weird the age people are going to be joining universities now? I'm going to feel, when I come back from my year abroad, I'm going to feel so old.
How do you think I feel? We're grandparents right now, like 3rd years. These past 2 years did not feel like 2 years worth of uni.
No, it didn't.
Still as stupid as I was when I came in. Law? What the hell's that? Jesus.
Is Louisa joining us as well?
I hope so.
Oh, Tom, also make me co-host just in case as well.
Is co-hosting activated on this one? Yes, it is.
Is it? Can you activate
it? You're co-hosting now, Lily?
Fantastic.
Why is all the stuff that Rada set up called CUIMUN?
I don't know. I just decided to go with it.
Anyway, we got nine people watching. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Take that as a win.
Okay, it means some people are actually getting onto it.
No, it's back down to 7.
Got disappointed in that. Yeah.
This is depressing as hell. So who we got doing the panel? We got
Sarah to Jolly, and then I should know because I'm introducing them. Nisreen, El Saim, and then Farooq. I will remember the surname in a second. So
Neil.
Yeah, there you go.
So we got the regulars coming. We got
good point. I need to send the link out to Julian. Okay.
So Julian's watching.
Well, he will be, and it's when I send him the link.
Oh, exciting stuff.
Kind of me, the big guy. Okay.
Julian, for context, is our senior treasurer and former MP for Cambridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are these people regulars then? These people we have on quite often.
They're people. Yeah, they're people who we have on a few times. mean, obviously, because they're just really good. They're just very nice people.
Mhm.
And you can kind of rely on them to be just really fantastic.
Okay. And they all have the Anya, they all have the like CUIMUN link as well, don't they?
Yeah, they all have. And I've not gotten any emails saying that not being able to join or something.
Okay, hopefully they'll start joining in a second.
We've got 12 now. Just for context for anyone watching this, the live stream will start shortly. I feel like that has to be emphasized for the 16 viewers we now have. We're going to start this very, very shortly. Have Richard, Farouk, and Nisreen got the link to this?
Yeah, I did. I've sent it to them before. They've confirmed as well. So, and I've not gotten any email saying that they haven't been able to join or anything like that.
Okay, that's fine. Perfect.
Okay, I assume that might be someone.
Who is that though?
I'm assuming it's one of the speakers. Oh, they've gone.
I'm wary of inviting people, considering we are live streaming this to now 19 people. I'm wary of just letting anyone in unless we know who they are. What's everyone doing to celebrate the conference finishing? This is the question.
Well, I'm heading back to Cambridge tomorrow, so that's my form of celebration.
Where are you staying in college, Christian?
No, I'm in Bristol with my boyfriend.
Oh, okay. And I'm saying when you go back to college.
No, we're getting private accommodation together.
Ooh.
Oh, nice.
Very
Yeah.
fancy.
I'll be having braces on Tuesday, so bit of a full week.
Where's your accommodation going to be?
No, it's just like a student. It's called Castle Hill, so it's near Murray Edwards, so quite close to John's. So
Since when's Murray Edwards close to John's?
it's like a 10-minute walk towards the Crips one.
That's Cambridge Far. That is Cambridge Far, mate. If it's not
compared to some of the other ones, like Parker's Piece is like a 20-minute one. So
yeah, but you don't have to go out to Parker's Piece. God forbid.
Yeah,
No, my rule of thumb is if it's not
reminded.
Sorry, Emily.
I was just saying, Anya, if you could send some reminder emails or just say that we've started the call.
Yeah, will do.
We've got 30 people watching, so ideally start this ASAP. I can't believe you described Murray Edwards as close to John's, Christian. That's just terrible.
What about Homerton or like Girton? Those are like God knows where.
Well, Girton's a bit of a. So I mean, my girlfriend's at Girton, and let me tell you, it's just not worth the bike ride at this point. Especially after I got into a motorcycle accident, and then it like became really not worth the ride.
Which is why private accommodation, because Tom's in Keys, and even that's too far for us. So.
I mean, I'm sure. You can basically have, if you get a good single, you basically have someone move in.
I could not sleep on a single bed. My back was dead. Like the bed in Crips cannot accommodate two people.
No, that is true. I think Johns do make the beds deliberately small.
It is definitely not a standard single. Like,
oh, no,
and also the side of the bed is like hard as rock.
No, so, I went with a measuring tape once. It's really, really small, especially the Crips ones. Like I think they make them smaller than usual. Sort of I imagine the US Marines sort of like boot camp has wider single beds. I hope the people watching this appreciate our chat.
Yeah.
I've sent a
It's a
reminder.
bit of
email.
intel into Cambridge, but yeah.
Yeah, we're having an admissions talk, right, guys?
Yeah, that's
Awesome.
the last one.
Back into Cambridge.
Awesome. So we don't need to do this insight into the, you know, comparative width of college beds. God, come to CUIMUN for the debate. Stay for the, you know, real insight into college life.
It's weird that the three of them.
Yeah.
Oh, are we sure we specified the correct times?
Yeah.
Did we
Yeah.
get the right time?
And
Did we
they
say, did you say GMT or British time?
I just wrote 3 p.m. UK time. I haven't
that's-
gotten.
That is weird. They haven't turned up.
Yeah, and I double checked the link as well that I sent them. It still links back to this
No,
one.
I imagine it's just a problem on their end. That's all right. It's fine. Is there anything we can do in the meantime that makes the people watching?
Well, I mean, we could switch it round and go for the workshops first, Anya. Can we do that?
No, the speakers would have to be told to join early unless
Because we have Christian here.
unless,
That's why
yeah.
we
Christian
did like
is
one
joining
now,
us.
and then
Yeah.
but I don't know if Christian will be up to that right now.
No, I don't think switching
see it.
around is a good idea.
Yeah.
I think it's a faff for the panel speakers if they turn up now.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Emily, don't you have Farouk and Nisreen on WhatsApp? Do you want to maybe try messaging them?
Yes, I was just trying to call Nisreen, but she was last on WhatsApp at 9 a.m. So that doesn't sound.
Emily,
Although I'll try calling through. What? Sorry.
maybe it's worth right now. What we could do is we could turn on the live chat and do like a Cambridge Q&A, like
Yeah, that works. Yeah.
While we're all here.
Let me try and get in contact with Farouk.
Okay. Right. Chris, who wants to do that? I'll set the live chat up. This could be famous last words, that being said.
Okay, Farouk is joining. He got the time wrong because he's I think he's in Pakistan.
Is he joining now?
Yeah, but that was an issue on his end, so I'm quite confused why the other ones haven't.
Okay.
Let me I'll get in touch with Janet Barr and see if she can call Richard Jolly.
Right. Okay. We've got one dislike on the video, which is
We had one dislike for the opening ceremony as well, though.
a strong one. Anyway, so everyone listening, we're sorry about the delay. We're just getting some of our speakers sorted. What we have done, obviously, this is the Cambridge University United Nations conference. So what we've done while we're waiting for the panel event to start, we've opened up the live chat. So if you guys have any questions about applying to Cambridge or what it's like doing our subjects, feel free to pop it in and we'll be really happy to answer them. We are doing an actual admissions talk later, but while we're waiting now, I think it's worthwhile that we, give you some insight into the process of application. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop in the live chat and we'll get set about answering them. Just for context here, My name's Tom. I'm going to third year, and I'm a law student at St John's College. Barry, Anya, you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. So I can go next. I'm Anya Gupta. I'm studying economics. I'll be starting my second year going in, and I'm at Homerton College in Cambridge. So yeah, feel free to drop in any questions.
Yeah, I'm Barry. I'm studying human, social, and political sciences at King's College, and I'm also going into my second year. Yeah, that's all.
Oh, there we go. Christian, Louise, and Stafford. Do you want to introduce yourselves or?
Sure, sorry, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to.
No, don't worry.
I'm Louisa, yeah, and I'm...
Okay, Janet's gonna call Richard.
Fab. We'll get this all sorted. Emily, why don't you introduce yourself?
Introduce myself?
Oh, yeah.
I already did that. I think Barry and Anya can introduce themselves now.
No, Barry and Anne, you've done it. Emily, you're behind the time.
I've not done it. In what way did you introduce yourselves?
Well, what college are you at? What subject are you studying?
I am at Magdalen. I study modern and medieval languages, so Spanish, German, and Portuguese. So if anyone has any questions relating to that, then please feel free.
Okay, we've got a question. This is probably for Tom. What are they looking for in a law personal statement?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. Okay, the thing with law when you're applying is that they're not expecting you, and they never will expect you to have a lot of knowledge of law in advance, right? Other than people who take law A level, no one really knows a lot about law. The thing with applying to law is that you don't have to illustrate deep knowledge, but you have to illustrate interest. Because to put it bluntly, law is a very, very difficult subject. It's quite intense workload wise. So when someone's interviewing you and when they're looking at your personal statement, they're looking for people who have an interest in law, can explain why they want to do law, and people whose interest is going to sustain them so they won't drop out of the course. That's the key to it, really. So a lot of, I do edit personal statements for people from time to time. The big issue with every personal statement is a lot of the time it either comes across as if someone's more interested in doing a completely different subject, or it comes across as their parents wanted them to do law. And occasionally you get someone who's just like, it's obvious in their statement and their applications that they're doing it because they want to be a solicitor or a barrister down the line. In this country, we have a GDL. You can convert any degree into a law degree. So when you're doing an undergrad law degree, you have to express the reasons you want to do that for 3 years in particular. So if you're a good example for a law personal statement is really just come up with a good reason why you want to do law as opposed to your favorite subject. Oh, here we go. Farouk's here.
Farouk is here.
Fabulous.
And Richard is logging on now. I don't know about Nisreen though. Hello.
Hello. I'm so sorry. I deeply apologize. I thought it was 5 hours ahead, and I was just working at 8 o'clock. I am really sorry. There's the vagaries of being in a different time zone and being Sunday, so I deeply apologize. And wow,
no,
15.
Okay.
Right. So, hello everyone.
Hello.
Would you like to introduce yourself first of all?
Yes, my name is Farouk Amil. I was the former ambassador and deputy perm rep to the UN in New York, and then ambassador to Japan, and then my last formal diplomatic assignment, I was the ambassador to the UN in Geneva. So I've been dealing with multilateral diplomacy for many years. I'm now currently associated with a number of projects, and one is including Cambridge University's Intellectual Forum. So at Jesus College, that is.
Sorry, are we waiting on Sir Richard as well before we start, or should we?
Well, we can ask a couple of questions first of all, or if I don't know, if we want to discuss a topic and then Richard will join and we can create a discussion.
Yeah, sure. I think we were generally talking about the climate emergency and international organizations' role in facilitating that. I think Farooq, I think you were prepped for like a 10-minute opening remark, so I guess we can start with that. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Remember, I'm a diplomat. I speak more than 10 minutes, but I will keep it short. So the first thing was that when we talk about a climate emergency, the most shocking thing when the World Wildlife Fund released its report in 2018, I was in Geneva at the time, and they've reiterated ever since then. It made some headway, and there was some news traction on it. And they said that in the last 40 years, 60%. I mean, it's shocking and outrageous. 60% of our fellow inhabitants on this shared planet, of all species, whether from an elephant to an ant to a microbe, had all gone. 60%, and that's through human activity, which has been, exacerbated by climate change. So it was the first point I was going to talk about. Our humans' existence is completely intertwined with the ecosystems of all of the life forms on this earth. And for humankind to think otherwise, I think is very, very, very foolish. So, the facts that came from this report that 50% of our shallow water corals in the past 30 years have gone. 20% of the Amazon has disappeared in 50 years, and it's still going on. And nature provides, and they had put a figure on this, of $125 trillion a year in terms of supply of fresh air, clean water, food, energy, medicines, etc. So when we look at it in that context and what humankind is doing, it's absolutely unacceptable. Now, the environment issue, when we talk in the multilateral context and what everyone's doing, it's as much as a political issue as it is an economic one. And I can give you an example of this landmark, I think it was at the 63rd UNGA, the International Mother Earth Day, and it's now celebrated on 22nd of April every year. And this was in 2009. And it was President Evo Morales of Bolivia. And he wasn't exactly liked by a lot of the countries because of his leftist views. Irrespective of that, he said that 60 years after adopting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Mother Earth is finally having her own rights recognized. And we're strangling the planet and we're strangling ourselves. And what his punchline was, and it stayed with me ever since then, was what mankind must know is that human beings cannot live without Mother Earth, but the planet can live without humans. And I think everybody said this and repeated this ad nauseum. So the issue is that whilst the environment is of everyone's concern, this debate identified and highlighted how convoluted the arguments would be, where the narrowness of commercial self-interest conflicted with the case of the environment, and that too set it against the backdrop of ideological issues. Well, we just don't like him, so we're not going to endorse him. Or some countries would be saying, well, International Mother Earth, is that leading us towards recognizing Mother, like in the sense of paganism? I mean, all kinds of arguments came up just for a simple thing like that. So it is celebrated. But what I would say is that you've got to, of course, celebrate this and spark people's imagination in the next generation. But that just is exemplified to me. And of course, there's many more examples. Now, the other thing that I was very much interested in during my time in New York, and it's now, 15 years ago, the oceans became the dumping ground for human activity as the Industrial Revolution revved up, with scant regards for what humans couldn't see or touch or feel, which is not bothered about. It's a toilet, just throw everything in there. So the ocean activists were dismissed as fringe lunatics for many, many years, and civil society protecting their fishing rights. Something that there would be global corporations quietly cheered them on and said, well, it's good. Let someone else. We don't want to deal with this. But fortunately, numerous community and civil society organizations within the international multilateral forums kept bringing these issues up. And and I remember chairing and hosting something specifically when there's an NGO called the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition, and we were chair of the G77. And I said, no, we must do this. So we did this, and I just, it just came out of my, I just said, well, will we allow the greed of humankind to destroy the very thing which sustains life on our planet? So if you can imagine, if the oceans are gone, that's it. It doesn't matter what you're doing. I mean, it's as simple as that. And so it's there's so much about the oceans that I could talk about, but I want to keep just another aspect. You have many people, your viewers, and particularly industrialized, wealthy societies, and they're concerned about climate change, and they're investing in solar panels, and they're doing all kinds of recycling at home, and doing all the right, ticking all the right boxes. But then they'll go on a cruise, oblivious to the shocking pollution that these large vessels cause to the world's oceans. And there's an example that I got from transportenvironment.org. And in the Carnival Cruises, which are the world's largest luxury cruise operator, emitted 10 times more sulfur oxide around the European coast than did all of Europe's 260 million cars. And when you put it in that context, then you understand that things haven't really changed, and people aren't really bothered, or they've just remained oblivious. And we're all focused on, and even Greta Thunberg, I'm not going to take a plane. Well, the cruising emits 4 times more CO2 per passenger than flying. Where's the discussion on this? So there's all these facts. I'm not going to go into those. So Western cities can ban dirty, diesel cars, but the governments are giving a free pass to the cruise line industry. And you look at the size of, and they use diesel. So there's a really good, I don't know, it's a cruise ship pollution, a tale of Titanic tyranny, and it's from about a year ago, August last year. It's actually worth looking at. And you must, by the way, butt in, because I've got all these things to say. When my 10 minutes are up, please tell me.
Oh yes,
all right?
absolutely. But so far, so good.
You're right. The plundering of the ocean resources by those with the technological means remains a problem. And the law of the sea gives a lot of these countries legal cover and opportunity. So, for example, you have huge factory ships that come from all over the world, and they're anchored just outside the national territorial waters, primarily of poorer countries. And if it's being recorded, you can go back to look at this. New York Times, 14th of January 2008. There's a really fantastic story. Well, it's actually appalling. Europe takes Africa's fish, and the migrants follow. So what happened was that all these factory ships were parked off this West African country, and the people that were living there had a sustainable lifestyle. They would, they had their own communities. They'd go out and fish, and they'd come back, and it was some kind of balance that they had. But when those fish stocks were depleted, where did they all end up? And according to the New York Times, they all ended up in those banlieues that ring Paris, adding to the migrant problem and all kinds of other things. So this gives you an example. It's not just climate change, it's greed and exploitation, particularly of the South, that encourages this kind of tragedy. Now, but let me just say, it's not just only Western nations, and there's plenty of other advanced countries that are out there taking, the ocean's resources in terms of food sources. Right. The other thing is coming to Fukushima. Now, you must have heard that the Japanese are going to release radioactive water. And they've said it's 1 million tons. They announced earlier on a few months back they're going to treat it and dilute it so the radiation levels are well below those set for drinking water. Fair enough. But that's their account. And there's an organization that I was researching, the president of the Institute of Energy and Environmental Research in Maryland, in the US, he said that before an organization like TEPCO is allowed to pollute the oceans with strontium-90 and tritium, it should be upon them to demonstrate that this is not going to severely disrupt the reproductive and energy systems of the living beings where they're going to dump this. Now, that makes sense to me. It's they need to. It's not like you just go and do that, and then God forbid there's a Godzilla that emerges from the oceans. So, and then also the same president of this institute said that it's very critical if they set a precedent on how to handle the situation in a way that's respectful for future generations. And I know I'm talking to a student body, and it's you're going to have to face all of this. That's respectful of the ecosystems, and that's respectful for your neighbors. So this kind of thing it just can't, I mean, it has to be looked at. And I think this gentleman at the Institute of Energy and Environment Research got it right. So next subject, and I said, please cut me off because I've got tons to say.
No, I think
intervention.
Oh, sorry. I'll just stop there. Yeah, I'll just stop there because it has
All
been
right,
2
okay,
minutes.
fair enough.
We might come back to it, but we've got Sir Richard Jolly joining us too, so I thought it'd be best.
Yes, of course.
Welcome him. Thank you so much, Sir Richard, for joining us. I'm very sorry for the wait. I just didn't want to interrupt. Sorry, Sir Richard, you're muted.
Right, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly well.
Good. Well, I must first of all of you apologize, but I want to give a fairly positive view about the impact of the UN, but also of international ideas and action. And I draw on my experience, 20 years with the UN. I worked for a short while with OECD, which is not the UN, of course, but it's the rich countries in Paris. But then I worked for 15 years with UNICEF, the Children's Fund, and 5 years with UNDP, the UN Development Program. I say this so people know I'm drawing on my personal experience. And my personal experience is that, and then after that, I worked with several colleagues, 16 in all, on doing a history of the UN. And if you can see this, which I hope you can, that's the final summary volume. It was 16 volumes, dare I say. But the final one was a summary. And the title was UN Ideas that Changed the World. And slightly to our surprise in this project, we realized that the main impact and the more positive one of the UN was not the Security Council meeting with governments or even action at country level. UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, for example, has offices now in 192 countries. And there's the World Health Organization, which I hope people realize and think has been making a positive impact and leadership in relation to the recent epidemic and so forth. But when we looked at the whole of the UN, then we thought the impact over 75 years was mostly in ideas, not in country by country action. It changed the frame of the way people looked at issues and actually did have considerable impact. And it's very important not just to say, well, where was the US on this? Because the United States has always had a total ambivalence towards the UN. It's been, it's been a threat to global leadership, their global leadership. Britain has moved from being, it still is very much the little brother to the big brother US, but the UK has often played an important role in the UN, and I hope it'll have an even more important role along with many, many other countries. Now, when we come to the impact of the UN ideas, we identified actually 7 ideas that were absolutely critical. The whole concept of human rights. It was around before the UN, but the Declaration of Human Rights by the UN in 1948 was absolutely critical. That was a global statement. And then the UN in its different ways has promoted that, discussions in New York, action and particularly in Geneva, where much of the UN on the human rights and health on the human issues takes place. If I come back to my own organization, UNICEF, UNICEF – early on was focused on the child rights, and and following up in practice and working with countries from 1969, I think, what do the human rights mean for that country? Let the UNICEF group working in that country not write it for you, but convene with the government and with non-government groups. What do child rights mean in the country? And then an evaluation. How are they getting on? Are they doing what they should do, not just in education or, let us say, health, but in some of the other child rights? And what about the inequality issues, child rights for the poorest? So we decided in our book of what the UN has actually done that human rights were absolutely critical. Then there's gender rights. Well, I hope now most people say, of course, but there was a time in which gender rights were not, of course, like that. And the UN, in a series of major conferences, 1976, I think, was the first one, of women and women's rights. And then there's been follow-on. And then you've been talking on environment. 1992, the Earth Summit, which at the time was Maurice Strong who was inspired to have a summit. And I was looking at the figures the other day. You know, there's never been a summit meeting before. We'd had a meeting in UNICEF in the UN in 1990, the first time the UN had ever had a meeting for heads of state. It may seem amazing, but until then, and I was there in UNICEF at the time, so there was quite a lot of argument by some governments. But look, all UN meetings under the rules of the UN have to be for whoever in the government they want to send. So there'd never been a summit meeting. And that was why in 1990, when the bold Jim Grant, the head of UNICEF, said, let's have a summit meeting, the UN said, no, you can have a meeting for heads of state on children in the UN building, but it can't be a formal UN meeting. It was a big success. I need to check how many, I think it was 71 or 73 heads of state came, not formally as a UN meeting, as a meeting for heads of state called by UNICEF in the UN building. But once people had seen that it was a way of getting attention and getting the power blocks of each country to come, then Maurice Strong in 1992 had the Earth Summit, which was formally a UN meeting, even though it was actually held in Rio. So my point is that ideas have always been an important part of UN leadership, but it's not just ideas. And I mentioned gender. It went on to being goals, and goals were set at, I think I mentioned that, at the first World Summit for Children, and goals were set then. Amazing it may seem, the only goal that had come out of the UN until then were goals for the growth of GNP. They were economic focused, and some would say over economic focus, not emphasizing the human side sufficiently. But once the Earth Summit came along, then broader goals, the UNFPA, the Fund for Population Activities, followed by setting some goals then, and in the 1990s. And then a big change was in 1995 or so, OECD had a meeting asking what should be their goals, the goals of the rich countries for the 21st century. And once the rich countries had said, there is a point in having goals, actually, then they changed the dynamic and politics of the UN. And that led in the 2000 to the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. And as I hope everyone knows, in 2015 to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So my point is that ideas matter, goals matter, and then of course the things that go along with goals. If you're going to have goals, you've got to monitor, not globally only, but you've got to monitor what's happening country by country, and some reporting mechanism, which there now is with the goals. And this is, as I've said, is applied now to gender, environment, to poverty reduction, and so forth. I think I'm going to leave it there and say I'm willing now to answer any questions. I advertise the book, which sets all this out. For those who find a book too long, it's got a very good 20-page summary at the beginning. Thank you.
I'll put the title of the book in the chat at the end of the panel. I do just want to first say thank you to both Sir Richard and Farrukh. Thank you so much for such a strong start. And I do just want to apologise to our delegates before we go any further for a bit of a messy beginning. We are really very sorry for that, but we hope that both the talks so far have been useful. I do want to remind everyone that before, I think before the conference started, you would have received a Google document to send through questions. So please, please go on that and submit your questions as soon as possible. We'd love to hear from all of you. We do have a few questions, so we can get started now. The first question is for Sir Richard. So Sir Richard, what characteristic of the UN do you think allowed for its influence on people's ideas?
Very, very good question. I think one of the things is the global standing of the UN. So when it agrees goals, it's not just a bunch of people doing that, it's country representatives doing that. So it has global authority. And then, of course, as I did mention, it has offices in most countries and a statistical system which requires or asks countries to, for example, send in data on education to UNESCO or on health to World Health Organization or agriculture. And the Statistical Office of the UN produces authoritative statistics, country by country, region, and globally, so we can see what is happening. And that form of reporting is absolutely vital.
Thank you. And the next question was for Farrukh. I'm just trying to get it out. How can we get started on careers in diplomacy and the UN when we're still in school?
Well, precisely by doing these model UNs. I mean, it's exactly this. Now, for example, I never had the opportunity to do that. I don't even have an international relations background or politics or economics. And you can still build up an interest, and you can come from, like me, geography and geology, which is, I guess, environmental sciences now. So you can, there's a million ways to do it. And I think what Sir Richard has just said about the inspirational and aspirational goals that the UN sets out, I think I absolutely endorse that, because I used to look at the UN and I used to think, yeah, God, these are really good ideas. We need to pick these up. And I didn't really ever think that I would end up both in New York and Geneva and then work in the multilateral field, even at headquarters. But it's something that you can gravitate towards if you plan things out. I mean, some people like to plan, but I sort of go along with the life's journey. So I think maybe I'm not the best person to be asking this, and not that I was an accidental diplomat, but or an accidental UN multilateral experience that came to me. But the thing is, if you follow what the UN, I mean, all of these agencies have excellent intern programs, and I know they're highly competitive. But you can still get in for your national government if you end up, for example, both in New York and Geneva, I had an intern program. I couldn't pay anybody, and so young people that would come and some people who were cash strapped, I would talk to the colleges and say, well, the internship that they're doing for 3 months will be the equivalent of a course which was costing them maybe $3,500-4,000. So they could save the money that way, and so it was a win-win situation. And some of them ended up with careers in the UN. So for if it's, I presume predominantly the audience today is British. So write to all the UN organizations, write to the UK missions in Geneva, New York, and other places. Not just there. There's Vienna, there's The Hague. There's so many different locations where you could possibly go. And but then look for funding, because the UN doesn't have money, and these days it really doesn't have that much money. So,
absolutely, thank you.
Can I add a thing on that?
Yes, of course.
The other thing is, you can have local meetings organized by a school, or in the case I'm thinking of one in Lewis, my town, 20,000 people, and they organized a meeting on. For women, and they got 10 girls from each of the 10 schools in Lewis, set at separate tables, all the girls from each school at the same table, and they were asked, what are the problems for girls at the moment in Lewis? And then, where would you like to see the position of girls in Lewis and in England in 2030? And the children were, it was wonderful. And that sort of thing can really be done, as I say, locally at a school, or even better at a town, so you get more diversity.
Yep, thank you. And yes, absolutely, feel free to add on to each other. It makes it a much well-rounded discussion. Thank you. The next question is open to both of you, so whoever wants to go first. What was your most rewarding experience working in international affairs? Whoever, Sir Richard, would you like to start?
Well, if you ask me, it had to be 1990, when UNICEF held the first summit for children, the World Summit for Children. And initially, as I said, it wasn't a formal UN meeting, absurd as it sounds now, but they said, no, anyone could come. But in the end, as I said, I think 71 heads of state came, one king, and I think that was it. And the preparations for that, in discussions all around what should be the goals, was absolutely exciting. And the meeting itself was interesting. It's the first time I got to discuss personally with Mrs. Thatcher. And at the time, people said the New York police, good heavens, with all these heads of state coming, you must lock down the whole of New York because the president of the US is coming. So no one was allowed to travel in New York after 7 a.m. And of course, everyone thought this is absolutely terrible, except for the head of UNICEF, Jim Grant, who said, that's fine. We'll have a coffee morning before the main meeting, and a chance for people to meet heads of state, the heads of state to talk to themselves and each other. So they're all invited to coffee at 7. And it was my chance to talk to Mrs. Thatcher and many others. So that certainly had to be one of the most exciting meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it does sound like it. Just and Farrukh, what for you? What would be the most rewarding experience?
Well, it's really difficult to pick out just one. It's a very difficult question because there's been so many different experiences throughout my career. But one was that I would think of when, at the time when everybody was, turning the nose up and saying, well, it's me first and it's this first and globalization's just awful. And they were running down multilateralism. And in Geneva, as I was chair of the Organization of Islamic Conference, and it was the first time in the history of the European Union, and the UK was still part of the EU in 2017-18, and the EU and the OIC had a joint resolution on one of the most dreadful problems that was taking place, and that was the Rohingyas. Now, I was lucky to have very good officers with me that was part of my team, and I had an absolutely excellent partner in the EU ambassador, Ambassador Walter Stevens. And over a course of a very complicated, and of course it's intensely, all of these things, you have the great ideas, you have the great messages. I'm a personal admirer of Dag Hammarskjöld, but you have all these wonderful ideas, but then the politics come in, and the UN is only what the member states make it. But we made it work, and it came out as a huge rebuttal to those people who were saying that multilateralism is over. You have the OIC is the largest group outside the UN itself, and then the EU with its all, it has all its frictions and pulls and pushes, and so does the OIC. Getting everybody to agree on this, that set up a mechanism for some kind of accountability and justice for the victims of that genocide. I think that this was an absolutely it was a sense of achievement. The other thing on a much smaller note was when I was in New York, Pakistan had the largest troop contributing country. And so the blue helmets were everywhere. And I think peacekeeping around the world, the UN has a great record. I mean, there are some blemishes here and there, but overall, it's something that the UN should be proud of. And they've done very, very well on this. And so during my time about 15, 16 years ago in New York, I was pushing for Pakistani women and women soldiers to come and join the UN. And they did. And this was absolutely wonderful, because it meant that, when you're talking about human rights, you're talking about women's empowerment, you're talking about global, it just brought it under one umbrella. It was absolutely fantastic that this happened. So I'm very, that was very important for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I add something here?
Yes, of course, please.
When we did the history of the UN, we tried to say, well, what is the UN? And we decided, if you looked at what the UN had done, had achieved, had succeeded, there was not one UN, there were 3 UNs. There is the UN formally of governments representatives meeting in New York or Geneva and sometimes in other regional capitals. Then there's the second UN, which is staff members. And staff members have a great influence in the UN. And you can imagine it, because if you're working for the British government, say, or Pakistan government, any government, the government can set a decision in relation to a particular issue and you have to follow it. If you're working as a staff member in the UN, in any part of the UN, you've got usually 36 governments on the immediate board controlling that area of action, health or children or development or agriculture. And they differ. So there's much more role in the UN and much more need for action by staff members. And that was a key discovery when we started looking at the things that had happened. But we then realized there was a third UN. And the third UN was supporters, people outside, not everyone outside, but those who follow or push, provide pressure on the UN to say, we do need action, say in human rights or on gender issue. So why is the UN neglecting environment or whatever? And often it was that third UN, ordinary people, country by country, which actually explained the issues which were taken up and taken up, made international by the UN, and then followed up at country level.
Thank you. That was really informative, Sir Richard. We do have a question just for Farrukh. What qualities do you think make a good diplomat?
Well, again, it varies from person to person. It depends which and also which culture you come from. Some cultures are generally very open and friendly, and other cultures are very reserved. And so you will find all kinds of diplomats. Is the diplomat that is a woman or a man of few words a better diplomat, or is a diplomat who is engaging and meets people and interacts outside the meetings and to thrash out ideas? So I think multilateral diplomacy is very different from bilateral diplomacy in that sense. So you could go to the delegates lounge and meet people, and then go for a coffee afterwards or a drink, and in the evenings have dinner, and you have a cross-fertilization of ideas. So a good diplomat, I think, has to be open to ideas. And I think not a bad diplomat, but a diplomat who becomes inflexible, others start avoiding that person. They say, oh God, we can't talk to this man, this woman or man. We need to, you should be able to have the capacity to project your country's point of view, but still retain an element of flexibility to hear what the other person is saying. It's absolutely critical. And I don't think you don't become small by accepting the other person's point of view. So can I just illustrate an actual example that's related to climate change as well? So when it was 2007, April 2007, and the UK was the president of that month of the Security Council. And I remember there was the Foreign Secretary at the time, Margaret Beckett, and Pakistan was the chair of NAM, the Non-Aligned Movement, and Pakistan had to make this very compromised statement. Now, at that time, Margaret Beckett and the UK were, I think, prescient, and they were absolutely correct. They said that there will be climate refugees, and now we know it's a reality. They could see the writing on the wall, but the opposition came from many countries saying, well, it's not the work of the Security Council, it's the work of the General Assembly. Fair enough. But the fact of the matter is that it brought, they flagged it, the UK flagged it way ahead of its time, because there are climate refugees and there'll be many more to come. But the point was, I remember, and I don't want to name names or countries, who was like, no, we can't accept this because it's the UK. And I was saying, my point was, look, they're saying the right thing. We need to have a middle ground with them, and I think that's what. If you reach for the middle ground, it's compromise is not weakness. It's because you've got to carry everybody along as a stakeholder, and you can't just force yourself on everybody else and say, well, I'm right. And you see this in the interventionist wars. Well, we're right and you're wrong. It's not as simple as that. So a good diplomat will win the trust of the country he or she is posted in, and win the trust and the confidence and somebody that the other diplomats know that they can talk to. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you. I think we have another question for the both of you. I do quite like this question. Is there something you don't like about the UN? If anything, is there what things do you not like about the UN? Whoever would like to go first? Sir Richard?
There's not much I don't like about the UN. I don't like UN salaries are pretty good for people who work for the UN. And I don't actually respect people who get in those jobs just because there's a good salary and there's a very good pension. So that's one clear dislike. It's a very difficult problem, actually, because people from a low GNP country, you can't say, well, we are only going to pay you in relation to your national salaries. You have to be paid in relation to a UN standard. Equally, if you're from Sweden or some of the Nordic countries, if you work for the UN, you get paid less than you would if you worked in your country, and your pension will be considerably lower. So that's a difficulty, but so I recognize the difficulty. I can't say I dislike it because the alternative is so unthinkable, paying different people different amounts according to which country they come from.
I would agree with Sir Richard on that. It's the salary structure, but there's also something else, and this may make a lot of people uncomfortable. In many countries around the world where I've seen the UN, they get paid very well. They do a great job, and I'm not saying that the job and the message but I see particularly in developing countries where the UN officials, many of them, are living the lives of diplomats from wealthy countries. Now, you are not a diplomat from Japan or Canada or Australia or France or the UK. It's a very limited amount of money that the UN has. And so I have seen that in many places, and I think, of course, I've had to face a lot of heated rebuttals on this from a number of people. Years ago, I'd said I don't know, 20 years ago, I'd met some UN person, and they were saying they were doing us a really good job by being in this country. And I said, look, I think I could do your job for a quarter of the salary, yet I'd be doubling mine. And that didn't go down very well. So I kind of echo what Sir Richard is saying. But it's when you look at the homes that they live in, and in developing countries, when these people are back home, they're in 1-bedroom apartments or 2-bedroom apartments, and that's fine, or bedsit, even a bedsit. But when they're in developing countries, there's the maid, there's the driver, there's the huge SUV. There's all of that. And that, I think that does not carry the original message of what the UN was and what people like, I think leading lights in the whole multilateral universe, Dag Hammarskjöld again, that's exactly what they didn't want. And if it's gravitated towards that, then that needs to be fixed. So for example, if there was an exercise called One UN, so why is it not possible? I used to live in an apartment building in New York, and I was fine. I mean, it's okay. So why can't the UN all be housed in, one building, let's say, to save money and live in apartments? But if you're in a 2-bedroom apartment, where does the maid go? Where does the driver go? Where's the person who's going to fix your cocktail parties go? So it becomes, this is a little uncomfortable for me. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're just joined by Nisreen. I think that's amazing. Hi, Nisreen.
Hi, how are you?
We're good.
I'm so sorry to be late. I was now I'm in Istanbul airport. My flight got 1 hour delay, so I thought I already missed it.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you so much for joining us, especially if you're so busy. We really, really appreciate it.
No problem. Normally September and October before COP gets very crazy.
Oh no, thank you so much. We truly do. We were all missing you quite a bit, so thank you for joining. So Nisreen, we might just move on to you then. If you do have time, would you like to present your opening remarks? Feel free to not get to the whole 10 minutes if you are running late for something.
No problem. I don't prepare like opening remarks because when you speak from the heart, it touches other people's heart too. So I know that, well, this event is so special for me because I always think that whenever we invest in young people more, whenever we get better results, because I don't think adults have made things work until now. So I think this day for me is so special, especially that we are really trying to engage with the even younger population, because normally we interact with 18 and above, and having even like lower age is for me is very much remarkable. Well, climate change. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Nisreen Al-Khaim. I'm from Sudan. I'm 26 years old, and I'm the chair of the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change. And to be able to actually explain what is the Youth Advisory Group, in 2019, the we had the first ever Youth Climate Summit in New York on the shade of the General Assembly. And there, the Secretary General decided to have a youth advisory group to be the bridge between the Secretary General and young people, and also to advise the Secretary, like to give them the youth perspective when it comes to the Secretary General's climate strategy and so on. So we are basically trying to be this linkage between the Secretary General and other young people. And also we are trying to give the honest, frank, and direct opinion of the young people to the Secretary General when it comes to how UN is doing regarding climate change, how other institutes is doing, what to do more, what to do less, how to become radical, because sometimes when you're a high level official, you need to stick with diplomacy. And for us, we are a bit revolutionary, let me say. So we are trying to keep this balance between actually having big, bold steps at the same time to do some diplomacy with policymakers from different countries. We finished 1 year of our term as the Youth Advisory Group. We have another year. And during this year, we had a lot of engagements, yet shaping how young people should participate in different things is, let me say, a long-lasting battle. We still don't like how we got the invitations to some things according to our gender or according to our geographic distribution instead of our professional and our backgrounds. Sometimes we just get invited to that make the panel diverse, let me say, and sometimes also we get invited to events where we given only 2 minutes, for example, while other speakers get 10 minutes and so on. So there's a lot of things that we are trying to push hard for right now, to be taken seriously, to be taken professionally, and also to be able to actually speak up who we are, what do we want to do, and how are we actually thinking to do it. Why I'm saying this, because, for example, climate change is a big issue for all of us, and we all know why we have climate change, and we all know the very simple answer for that. Yet there is a lot of there is a lot of thank you. It's so dangerous to sneeze these days with the COVID. Every time I sneeze or cough, I feel people are trying to run away from me, especially in airports. Anyway, thank you. We know what caused climate change, and we know how actually to solve the issue of climate change. Not a permanent solution, let me say, but at least to mitigate the impact of climate change, to stop global warming where it is right now. Yet there is a lot of opposition from the private sector, from the oil and gas industry sector, from even the policymakers and the decision makers, because they want to more resources to the people. They want to get re-elected. They want to have the extra welfare that actually planet doesn't need it, even people doesn't need it. I always ask the question, do you prefer to live long, healthy life, or you prefer to die rich in a very contaminated and a very polluted planet? And the question is so simple. We don't need to actually continue polluting. We don't need to continue gathering money. All we need is the basics plus a bit of development that doesn't actually hurt the planet, and that's why we have the sustainable development. Well, in Sudan, for example, climate change actually impacts everything. It impacts the economy, because most of our economy based on agriculture and cattle, and all of these things are very climate sensitive. Any variation, any change in the climate, of course, will damage a lot the economy. It also impact the people's life, because we started to have a lot of IDPs and a lot of migrants because of droughts, because of desertification, and because of many other things. It also caused a lot of conflicts. Normally it starts as a conflict over natural resources, and then the conflict develop. It also impacts how we build our infrastructure, because Sudan is the least developed countries actually, and we hardly have roads, for example, no highways, for example. So the very little infrastructure we have, one flood can actually destroy it, and then we've left with nothing. So it impacts everything. Access to services like health. Whenever we have a big dust storm, for example, you cannot go outside, you cannot drive, you cannot do anything. So even if someone is giving birth, for example, or someone is so sick, then you better hope you have a doctor in the house. Otherwise, it would be very hard to access the health services. Not only that, I can talk until tomorrow on how climate change is impacting Sudan and impacting the population of Sudan. But yet we are only hanging our hopes on the young people to be the innovative, to be the adaptation messengers, and also to be the future that we all hope and seek for. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Nasreen. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's Sir Richard giving you a round of applause. I'm not sure if you can see. But no, I think all our young delegates are very, very inspired by you. So thank you so much for that. I do think we have time just for one last question, but if I will ask everyone, but if everyone could just keep it a little bit short, because we are running a tad bit over time, so less than a minute. One of our delegates is asking, and Nasreen, maybe you want to start with this, since, with your own experience of being in the UN, and then we'll go to Farah and then Sir Richard. Do you think the UN should hold more power, given the context of our discussion today?
Sorry, come again, please.
Sorry, given the context of our discussion today, do you think the UN should hold more power?
Well, unfortunately, UN have no power. And UN will not, sorry for the announcement, UN will not be able also to hold any more power. Why? Because UN is actually an institution or organization founded by member states. So actually it's owned somehow by member state. I don't like to say owned, but it's so member state can hold the UN Secretary General or any UN entity into account, and not the opposite. There is no mechanisms of forcing member states of doing things at the UN, because it's basically initiated by the member states, if you got my point. Unfortunately, we are not living in a fair world, let me say. And UN is playing a great role in helping people and also trying to build their capacities in different sector, health, in children, in humanitarian, and so on. But when it comes to decision making, UN cannot force. It can influence, of course. There is a big diplomatic part that the UN Secretary General plays, but unfortunately, it cannot force anything into any member state. And this is actually one of the biggest problem, that the member states currently are the higher, let me say, power, unfortunately. But this is also a very good question for all of us to actually elect people who actually represent us, and we elect leaders who actually want us to transform to the world that we wish and we hope to live in.
Thank you. Farah, would you like to go?
Yes, thank you very much. I think the UN has power. It has the power of ideas, and it has the power of generational changes, and it has the power of inspirational, as I said earlier on, and aspirational goals. And what it does through education, through poverty alleviation, and the great thing that they've done through peacekeeping, it can change people's minds, as it has done on women's rights, on human rights. So it has a lot of power. Of course, then I know what the other guest is saying, and she's absolutely right. That it's the powerful countries, and the UN is only as powerful as the players within the UN, and we know how that all operates. But there are formal ways of binding resolutions. So the UN Security Council resolutions are binding, and it's incumbent on those who are being judged to implement those resolutions, and it's happened. The only problem with that is it's been done on a very selective basis, and many countries, depending on politics and strategy and national alignments, escape that. So that is a bit of a mixed bag, but there are enforceable. And for example, SDGs, once you've signed on to the SDGs, it's incumbent upon you to implement them and have a national program, just as we're preparing for COP26. You've got to have those national plans, and you've got to go there and say, well, we're doing this because the idea came from somewhere. So the power of ideas.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Sir Richard.
Well, I go along with both previous speakers. Never underestimate the power of ideas. And in the long run, it's ideas and not government force, for better or worse, that will change the world.
Thank you. And I think that's a perfect way to end our discussion today, to end our panel, sorry. Thank you so much for our lovely speakers for taking the time out of their incredibly busy schedules. I also just want to say thank you to our delegates for sitting in, hanging in tight. I'm very sorry that we started late. And I really do hope that, obviously, due to the constraints, we weren't able to provide a more interactive panel, but hopefully in future conferences we will. Thank you so much. Once again, I'll hand over to Anya now for the workshops. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone for joining in. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we all did putting it up for you guys. Up next, we're going to have a couple of workshops, which I think y'all will find really insightful. Same as the panel discussion, y'all can submit your questions throughout the workshops on the Google document. So first, I'm very excited to introduce Christian CUIMUN, who will be speaking about public speaking. He's a second-year student at the University of Cambridge and has a lot of previous experiences with multiple MUNs. He's actually a part of the Secretariat this year, and some of you may actually know him from your committees. So thank you, Christian, for taking this time to speak to us today. And without any further ado, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure, thank you very much. I'm not too sure how I'm supposed to follow that from the wonderful speakers we've had, since obviously they've gone on to done great things, even at the young age of 27. But since we're focusing on public speaking, I guess I can speak a little bit about that. So just briefly about my public speaking experience. So I actually grew up and went to school in Hong Kong. So back in Hong Kong, I represented Hong Kong twice in, I think, 4 international competitions, and I'm ranked first in public speaking in 2019 in Hong Kong and in the Greater China region. So that's just a little bit about me. So let's get straight into it, right? How do you do a public speech? So normally how I like to do these things is if it's like a great big classroom or a great Zoom call, I can sort of get people to raise their hands and whatnot. But with this being a YouTube live stream, that's not quite possible. So sadly, it's just going to be me speaking for the first 5-10 minutes or so. And Anya, if there's any questions, you can feel free to just jump in afterwards. So to try give a little order, because obviously structure is very important in public speaking. Let me first outline how I think the next 10 minutes is going to go. First of all, I'm going to talk about what is the most important thing in a public speech, which is basically following on from one of the themes that the 3 speakers left off with is ideas. You need to have a really central idea to ground your speech. Otherwise, it's just not going to go anywhere. So that's the first thing I'm going to talk about. Second of all, I'm going to go through the 3 main parts of a public speech that are the most common: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. So it's pretty much just like your standard speech or essay, but I'll go into a little bit more depth as to some of the ways you could elevate your speech next time. And the final thing I'm going to say is, other than the content, how to make sure that your speech is persuasive and how can you speak more charismatically. So that's sort of like the 3 things I'm going to focus on today. So let's start off with the first thing, ideas. So I actually concur very much with what the speakers were saying just now, right? Don't underestimate the power of ideas, not just in making a change in the world, but also because ideas are what you need to give your speech conviction. If you told me to give a speech about, I don't know, why playing Xbox is the most important thing in the world, I probably would only be able to give a very half-hearted speech because sadly, I'm not an avid gamer. I can probably just rat off some statistics about, games are good for hand-eye coordination, but you probably wouldn't believe me because I don't sound that convinced myself. So that's why when you're given the ability to choose, for example, most speaking competitions will give you a theme, try always to go with things that you yourself truly believe with. Even if in the initial stages when you're brainstorming about what to say, you're not too sure about your stance, as long as you have a rough inkling of where you stand on the topic, as you research the problem, as you research the issue, you slowly clarify your own stance. And once you really have that, then you can start writing your speech and you'll find it much easier, because then you're not just really writing a speech, you're trying to convince others of something you believe as well, which makes public speaking so much easier. And so that's why the moment you decide to put pen to paper, what you should have in your mind is, for this next 3, 4, 5 minute speech, what am I trying to get across? Because public speaking should aim to do 3 things. Number one, it should aim to entertain, because obviously if it's a very boring public speech, no one's going to want to listen. If I spoke like this for 10 minutes, a lot of you are literally going to fall asleep, right? So it's important to try to make it more lively, to give a little bit more boost in your tone, etc., to make sure the audience is listening. But the second and third thing are the more important ones, right? The second is to inform. You don't want your speech to be repeating something the audience knows entirely. Like, so don't tell them, oh, the English alphabet has 26 letters. It's not the most insightful thing. So really try to make sure in every public speech that you're actually teaching something new to the audience, because that's how you pique people's curiosity. And the final thing, other than to entertain and to inform, is, as in the title, persuasive speeches imply, to persuade. So you want to make sure, much as how you might argue with your mom about having more screen time or getting the new iPhone, when you try to have these arguments, you are trying to persuade someone to change their mindsets or change their actions. And that's a similar thing you should have going into writing a public speech. You want to make sure you're using statistics, using examples, you're using whatever means possible to try and persuade someone. And that's why, to connect these 2 parts, the most important thing is to have an idea that you believe and use that idea or that belief to persuade others to perhaps change their mind or to have certain changes in their actions. So that's the first bit. Now going more into the specifics about public speaking, about the 3 parts. So starting off with introduction, a lot of people like to just start with the very standard, good morning, everyone, my name is blah, blah, blah. That's something I did as well, since obviously this is a more formal occasion. But if you wanted to start a speech in a more engaging manner, maybe ask a question. For example, how many in the audience today have done MUN before? Or what is MUN to you? Pause for a second, let the audience think about it, and then follow on with what you're saying. For example, MUN to me is not just a means as a normal activity or some like ECA or something to pad your CV. It's a great opportunity to meet fellow, like-minded people who have an interest in international relations, as well as a great opportunity to stand in someone else's shoes and really think about an issue from a different perspective. So that was just a really quick example of like an opening, but you can see by simply adding the question right from the very start and letting the audience think about it, it becomes much more interactive, because obviously interaction is something we want. Other ways you could start a speech, for example, a quote, a very shocking statistic, an imaginary scenario. All of these things can signal to the audience that you're not just some random boring lecturer who's trying to deliver a 60-minute, monologue, that you're actually trying to engage the audience in this speech together so that it can be more entertaining and lively. So that's the first part. But other than what we like to call this as a hook, because you're hooking the attention, the second thing you should also try to do in your introduction is outline your speech. So obviously you could do it super formally, like I did when I said firstly, secondly, thirdly, this is what I'm going to do. But there are also more lively ways of doing it. For example, saying, by the end of this speech today, I hope to have been able to teach you a thing or two about public speaking. Just a quick statement like that, outlining what your main goal of the speech is going to be, will already clear up so many questions in the audience's mind as to what you're trying to say. So that's just 2 of the things that I think are very helpful in every introduction in a public speech. So now moving on to the main body. Obviously, the most important thing, like some of you, especially those in like English literature, will have known about the structure called PEAL. So what it stands for is point, elaboration, or example, analysis, and linkage. So I find this really helpful in public speeches when you're trying to go into the depth or the content of your speech, because then you're always constantly reminded that, number one, you should give a topic sentence, as we like to say in essays or in a speech, just a main header line, like firstly, for example, about climate change, talking about the tangential impacts that will happen as global warming occurs to these places around the world. So that's the main point you want to get across. And then example, obviously backing up with concrete examples is much more effective than just leaving it up to theoretical or hypothetical. Analysis means you're not just reading out a textbook example. You're really trying to perhaps imbue the example with more emotions, perhaps really delve into how specifically we as teens are related to that issue, how we will be specifically impacted by it, things like that you may not get immediately or directly from a textbook. It's really your own thoughts and, you know, analysis, as it's called, into your speech, because in that way it sounds less robotic, sounds less like a Wikipedia page, and it shows how you're actively engaging with your speech material as well. And the final thing is to link, because as public speaking goes, as I mentioned, there should always be one central idea. You want to keep linking back to that central idea so the audience member does not forget what you're trying to get across. So that's the main body. And finally, conclusion. Conclusion, there's not too much to say. What I will say, though, is that it is very important, because a lot of people sort of just randomly stopped in the middle of their speech. And then the judges or the audience looks around and goes, are they forgetting what they're saying? Is there a buffer on Zoom? What's going on? But if you're able to really, you know, the usual signifiers to conclude, all in all, this is what I think. Overall, this is what, blah, 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 blah. It's a really good signifier and shows that your structure is not abrupt. It means that your speech from start to end sounds nice and is not just cut off very abruptly. And that leaves the audience with a better lasting impression as well. If you're able to really conclude or basically summarize or sketch out the main points you've had, so as to act as a refresher of sorts to tell the audience what you were trying to tell them that day. So those three are the really quick things that I think are very helpful. I think I might be overrunning slightly. I'm not sure, Anya. But because we start, yeah, but very quickly. So other than content, I think a few main things is eye contact. So this is something that a lot of people will struggle with. It'll definitely be easier over Zoom because you're just looking at your camera or your screen. But once in real life, public speeches or events happen again, a lot of people will probably face that issue. So the easiest one you'll hear online is to look somewhere in their like eyebrows or forehead or whatever. I think that works totally fine. But for me personally, I think rather than just, you know, if you've done a few public speeches, you're comfortable with looking at their eyebrows now, you should start trying to look people in the eye, because the benefit of that is that you can see how engaged people are. Because like it's very difficult to say how, but you know, when you've had a conversation with someone and their eyes glaze over or they're staring off to somewhere else, you know, there's probably something wrong with your speech. So if you make that eye contact with people, not only do they feel more obliged to listen to you, you yourself can also make slight adjustments to your speech. For example, introducing a quick joke, you know, trying to suddenly up the volume to make their, like, you know, just auditorily some audio interest in terms of trying to get the attention back. So I think eye contact is very helpful in trying to sort of get cues from the audience. Obviously, hand gestures as well. You can't really see my hands over Zoom, but just in general, if you sort of stick to your sides or, you know, crossed over or like twiddling your thumbs, it's not the best portrayal of confidence. So if you're able to, for example, you know, a lot of orators like to do this. I also like to do this a lot. It just makes you seem more open, more inviting. Yeah, and overall just seems to be more persuasive. And the final thing is obviously volume and tone, as in like how you speak. It takes time and practice, but the best thing I'm going to say is listen to other people's public speeches and note down what they're doing. Are they speaking very flatly? Do they have a lot of variation in their pitches and tone? Where are they stressing their words, etc.? It's sort of by practice and by listening, can you slowly start to pick up on those cues as to how you can make your speech more engaging. But yeah, that's where I'm going to end it for my monologue. Yeah. Hopefully it's been relatively interesting, but yeah.
Maybe we have time to just squeeze in one quick question. So we had someone ask, what can we do to practice public speaking?
So the easiest public speaking practice, I think, is impromptu public speeches. So all you have to do is get 2 friends or 1 friend even, or even just your pet toy, place them across the room, find a random object around your house or a quote or a phrase. So go online and search awe-inspiring quotes. Give yourself 5 minutes to think about, if this were really a public speaking topic I was given, what can I say? And you'll find that at first it's very awkward. You're going to look your teddy bear in the eye and go, I'm not too sure what to say. But as time goes on, you'll start to be able to pull from your own life experiences and examples you know, and start using those in your own speeches and making them more convincing and doing all the things I mentioned just now. I think that's a great way to start.
Thank you so much, Christian. I'm sure it's been very helpful. I'll definitely be trying to incorporate these tips going on. I think, as y'all can probably see, we already have our next speaker here with us. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce her. Thank you so much, Christian, once again. Now we're going to have a quick talk by Ms. Josephine Hebling, who is an advocate for the voice of young people on the international level, specifically at the UN. She is currently studying political science at the University of Mannheim and is a student assistant in the field of international relations and international political economy. When she was just 14 and 16 years old, she traveled to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child and represented the interests of children in Germany. In 2019, she was selected as the German youth delegate to the General Assembly and represented the demands of young people across the country. In recognition of her engagement on including young people meaningfully in political decisions, she was awarded the Golden Pea Award in 2019 alongside Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Samuel Koch, and Esther Bejarano. I think, Josephine, you've definitely been a huge inspiration to all of us. So we're really excited to hear from you. Over to you, Josie.
Thank you so much for that kind and elaborate introduction. Today I'll be talking about my experiences, particularly as the German youth delegate to the United Nations, which I was in the year 2019 and 2020. And the whole idea was representing young people at the United Nations. So I'm really excited about your questions as well regarding my experiences, and just ask me anything. I'm really excited to hear what questions you guys will have. Since I have a 20-minute slot, I will be shortly presenting my main insights as a youth delegate with some slides, and I'll be showing you guys some pictures as well. And then the last 10 minutes, you guys will have time to ask me any questions. As far as I understood, Anya, you will be reading out the questions that will be in the document. So I'm looking forward to any kind of discussion in the end.
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay, great. So I'll be starting to share my screen. I hope it works, and be patient with me because it doesn't always work on the first try. But yeah, if you have any questions, maybe just ask me after the presentation, since I won't be seeing you guys, and then it'll be hard to engage, but we'll figure it out. So let's see. Okay, so I'm guessing you'll see my screen right now, and then I'll just be showing the presentation. Are you guys can you see my slides?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, go ahead.
Great. I'm guessing this is the first time it actually worked on the first try. It always usually took a few tries. But yeah, so my overall title of the presentation today will be about giving youth a voice at the United Nations, and I'll be giving you guys a personal review as the German youth delegate to the UN General Assembly for the year 2019 and 2020. So there are a couple of questions that I want to answer in the course of this presentation. So first, I want to discuss why we actually should engage youth at the United Nations. Why is it important? What's the meaning behind all this effort to bring young demands to the United Nations? Then what is the youth delegate program? So what is the program I participated in, and what role did I have? Then what are my main takeaways as youth delegate, and what are also these implications for the future? So what does that mean for future youth delegates and for the future of young people at the United Nations in general? So first of all, why should we actually engage young people at the United Nations? There's three core points that I always mention when talking to representatives and to politicians, because I don't think it can be understated how important it is to give young people a say in the decisions that are made today, because we will be living with the consequences of the decisions made today. But oftentimes we don't have a say, a meaningful say, at least in political processes, because we're not asked for our opinion. And we are maybe not even voters yet, because we haven't reached the age yet. So there are many parts that just don't really quite fit. So we should really have, as young people, more say in political decision-making processes. since we are also underrepresented in political processes. And at the same time, I noticed when I organized workshops with young people that young people actually have quite a different perspective on the solutions or on the global problems in general. And since we will, be affected by these problems for the longest of everyone, and therefore we have quite a sustainable perspective on these problems because we think very much in the long term rather than in the short term. And this leads to very creative, innovative, and also effective solutions. And I think we could all need more like sustainable solutions and innovative solutions right now. And it was my idea to like capture this creativity of young people as the German Youth Delegate. So I'll be briefly explaining to you what the Youth Delegate program is. Of course, since I'll only be presenting this to you in like 10 minutes, this is only like the most like core idea of the Youth Delegate program, but there's so many more aspects to it. So the very general basic understanding of being a youth delegate, or particularly the German youth delegate at the United Nations, is that you are selected to have this representative role for 12 months, meaning that you are the voice of the German youth, and your role is it to represent this voice at United Nations conferences. But before we get all into the United Nations conferences and how they were organized and what I experienced, it was first important to understand what young people actually want in Germany. After all, it wasn't my role to represent my own demands and my ideas. I actually had to like set those aside and ask young people what they want in Germany. So therefore, my co-youth delegate and I, because there are always two people selected for 1 year, we organized this huge consultation tour, meaning that we traveled across the country for 12 months and collected all these demands from young people by organizing workshops and especially trying to reach the young people who have not necessarily heard about the United Nations, because we also wanted to engage them with this new international political level that they have not connected so far. But one of my main insights is actually that young people are oftentimes more political than they expected themselves to be in the first place. And then after that workshop, oftentimes young people would say, oh, I wouldn't even have imagined how connected the United Nations is actually to my daily life. So it was all about bringing the United Nations closer to young people and also bringing young people closer to the United Nations. So after we collected all these thousands of demands in Germany, we went to 2 UN conferences in total. One of them was the UN General Assembly, which usually starts in September and goes for a couple of weeks, but we were there for 4 weeks. And then we also went to the Commission for Social Development, which starts in February and goes for about 2 to 3 weeks. So we attended both of those conferences. We were part of the negotiations. We gave speeches at the United Nations. And we also organized events for representatives to attend. We collaborated with other UN missions and then also with NGOs in order to discuss the topics that were important from the perspective of the German youth. So what are my main takeaways as youth delegate? So first of all, there are barriers to accessible participation. I would understand myself as quite a privileged young person in Germany since I have a university education, and I was able to get the resources to take the time to travel across Germany and so on. But it is important to note at this point that I didn't have to pay for my own expenses as youth delegate because it was funded by basically the government, you could say, and youth organization and a youth organization in Germany, as well as the German UNA. So the German United Nations Association. And therefore all my travel expenses and accommodation and also my food was covered in New York, but as well as during the consultation tours when I was traveling. So the idea was to make it accessible for everyone, but of course there are different starting points for different young people where they can actually try to reach this goal of becoming a youth delegate or engaging with international politics in general. Then I also noticed that young voices are perceived differently than other voices. For instance, than governmental representatives giving their speeches. And actually, that's not necessarily bad. I actually love getting feedback after giving speeches that the room was suddenly awake and they listened to this, because we have a certain power given by young people to us when giving our speeches, since we are backed by so many thousands of demands and so many thousands of voices of young people, that we can really bring a lot of energy into the conferences. And I love that like part, because you could really use that as your own like superpower as youth delegate. Then what is quite typical specifically for the international level is that small steps are also quite big achievements when it comes to the United Nations. One example that always comes to my mind when elaborating on this particular experience is that the negotiations on UN resolutions were also quite intense. Sometimes it was hard to achieve bigger like amendments to the resolutions, and we were really happy to make minor changes or even start discussions and like spark the first ideas when it comes to these negotiations, because it was not only us as German youth delegates participating, but there were also so many other governmental representatives participating. And as you can imagine, every country had a slightly different interest and perspective in these negotiations. So it is a really big dynamic process, and these negotiations were therefore quite a big discussion in the end. And anything that we could like start as a discussion as youth delegates, and any amendments we could introduce were already quite a big step. So that's probably the main difference between the international and more local levels of youth participation. Then there's also a trade-off between the freedom of what you're allowed to say and the influence that you have as a representative. So particularly what I noticed is that as a governmental representative, you have a lot of influence since you're representing the perspective of the government, but you are restricted to the perspective of what the government is like delegating for you to tell and introduce into the negotiations and what you should mention in your speeches. And when it comes to like representatives of NGOs, for instance, they have a lot of freedom in what they can say because they're not like connected to any like larger government. But at the same time, they don't have as much influence as like governmental representatives, since they don't have that backing of a member state officially participating in these negotiations. So what I loved about this youth delegate role is that you were like the perfect combination between these two like types of players, you could say, in negotiations and at the United Nations in general. So that was kind of really cool. And then lastly, I'll quickly discuss what the implications for the future are. So basically, what did I learn from all these wonderful experiences as a youth delegate, and what are like my main takeaways? So first, I want to highlight that including young people in any decision that affects their future will automatically result in a more sustainable solution. Since we already have that like long-term perspective on issues being discussed, we should actually be including young people in every decision affecting our future. And so far, political representatives tend to be rather old or older than young people. And young people don't really get to have a say oftentimes in political decision-making processes. Also, more member states need youth delegate programs. At the moment, you can see like in the picture shown in the bottom right corner that these are all the youth delegates from like the countries that have youth delegate programs at the moment, but there are about like 35 to 40 youth delegate programs in these countries, but there are 193 member states of the United Nations. So therefore, there's still a lot to be done. And for example, none of the permanent 5 member states from the Security Council have a youth delegate program. So there's really a lot still to be done. Also, I think the reasoning why we should include more young people in the United Nations should actually be self-evident. It just should be clear that we're underrepresented as a generation in political decision-making processes. And in the long term, we should really be included without having to fight for participating in the political decision-making processes every time we want to include our voice in that decision. And in the end, I noticed that young people are also finding alternative ways to influence political decisions, specifically when it comes to grassroots movements, creating organizations, even funding your own organizations, and just creating this collective identity among young people when it comes to finding more sustainable solutions and trying to hold politicians accountable. So I would love to hear about your experiences about that as well. Have you been politically active? And what are your experiences with youth participation? Are there any discrepancies between how you imagined the United Nations to be and how I explain it right now? I would love to hear your thoughts, and I'll stop my screen sharing. And yeah, we'll see how it goes from there. I know it was also super fast presentation, so I hope
no
you guys.
worries about that. Thank you so much. That's been really interesting. At the end, I noticed that you mentioned that there's a trade-off between freedom and influence. So that kind of leads me to one of the questions that the delegates sent in. They ask, do you think that young people have a greater impact in huge, complex organizations like the UN, or by being involved in more grassroots, smaller organizations?
So I think the influence in general can be the same, since they're both ways of trying to influence policies. It definitely depends on the issue itself. Is it a rather highly discussed topic? Do delegates among each other hardly agree on solutions, or is it rather a commonly agreed topic? I think the self-organization of young people and the creation of these grassroots moments is actually a symptom of not being involved in these international conferences and not having these structures where they can have this regulated process and constantly participate in structures. But instead they notice, okay, we're not being heard in international decision-making processes. There are hardly any structures that we can be part of regularly. And that's why we need to create these movements to be heard and to have a meaningful voice and a say in these decisions. So I think it would be hard for me to say what kind of participation has more influence, since it really depends on so many factors. But it's clear to me that these grassroots moments are really a symptom of not being heard enough, and young people know that their voice is meaningful. So we're organizing, we're there, and we're trying to make our voice heard.
That's definitely nice to hear, and that kind of leads me on to my next question. So we have someone who's asked, do you think that youth involvement in international organizations are merely tokenistic? And can you perhaps give us a time of some time you felt that, y'all were able to generate some real impacts? And if so, is there anything that we can do to better mobilize youth delegates or youth involvement in the future?
Okay. That's a really good question. I could even give a presentation about that question alone for over an hour, but I'll try to condense it to one really short answer. Yes, absolutely. There have been many moments where I had the feeling this kind of youth participation that I'm engaging with right now, that my friends are participating in right now, this is tokenistic. We're not being taken seriously. This is just a form of, I would say, a rather superficial participation of young people, but their voices are actually not really being heard. So I think the most important part, when you notice that there's no output to me actually saying anything, and this is a tokenistic way of me spending my time here talking to politicians, then I think it's really important to talk about that. And address that, because oftentimes adults who like are also organizing these like conferences or giving you this opportunity, they're not aware that this is tokenistic right now. And that's why you should speak up, but it should be a red flag immediately if you notice there are no output documents that are being like introduced, there's no outcome, there's not really any mentioning of what kind of impact you will have on the documents in the end. So I think it's really important to address that, and that's the way you can fight against that kind of tokenistic approach, or the tokenism in the end. But it's like an ongoing battle, and I think everyone has like struggled with it if you're a young person trying to make your voice heard on any kind of level, I would say. And when it comes to an example of maybe to add on to that, I think the negotiations are actually quite a good example of showing that it's possible to change something as a young person at the United Nations, but it's also quite a long process, which is connected to a lot of compromises in the end. So if you want to get one change adopted into the resolution in the end, you might have to compromise on another point or negotiate and say, oh, maybe this other point we should like, I don't know, go back on that again and give other countries more power on like influencing that point. So in the end, we did have some kind of influence in the negotiations, but they're like minor changes that make you like really excited about what you're able to change. And then also changing the mindsets in general of representatives, showing up to conferences, saying how important young people are in these processes. I think that's in the end, the way you can have the most long-term impact on these processes. Because I haven't been to the United Nations since February 2020, but I still have the feeling that I'm kind of having this influence on processes, since the people who I talked to back then, they're still part of the negotiations and they're still part of these processes. But then there are also like really small minor changes that we were able to achieve. And that goes back to even before I was a youth delegate. So that was more on the local level, but we were able to have the city build crosswalks because young people needed that in front of their school and they didn't have enough leverage. So they came up to us as this children's representative body. And then we were able to convince the city to build this crosswalk or try to make sure that this construction site on the school will give children enough space to still go out and play. So they're like minor things, but in the end, it kind of creates a larger picture.
Thank you so much, Rosie. That was quite interesting and also quite inspiring, actually. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. I'm sure the students really enjoyed hearing about that. So thank you so much. I already see that we have our next speaker with us. So next up, we're going to have a talk on careers at the UN by Michael Asquith. He is no stranger to foreign relations and international politics, as he's been working as an international development consultant at the UN since 2000. During his time at the UN, he has carried out multiple UN missions and has visited over 115 different countries. So we're really excited to have you here with us today. Perhaps you could start by giving us your opening remarks, and then we can move on to some questions, if that's okay.
Okay, Anya, can you hear me? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, good, thank you. Right, thank you, Emily, for inviting me to share in your conference. I've spoken before at CUNA UN Careers events, and it's always fun to go back a few years, as well as have an opportunity to visit the university in my old college, Peterhouse. And I had the couple of events in 2017 and 2019. And Anya, you asked me to talk about three things, and I hope I can do them all in the 15 minutes. First of all, a bit of my experience in the UN. Secondly, why is it important that young people get involved, hopefully from an early age, about UN and international affairs? And thirdly, if you guys want to join the UN after all this, how can you start preparing for UN career at a young age, including before university? So 3 basic points. I'll start with the first one. Firstly, on my past experience, while I was at Cambridge, I studied economics and politics. That was from 1965 to 68. Doesn't seem long ago to me. Maybe it's a long time for you guys. And while I was there, I was an active member of CUNA, and I participated in many of the talks and the activities which it organized. I was also on its committee and responsible for public information. And during my last year, I learned about the British Volunteer Programme, which brought together VSO, which you've probably heard about, and 3 other organizations which used to send out volunteers. One of them was the UNA, which still exists as UNA UK. Unfortunately, this volunteer program into the UN doesn't seem to exist anymore, but there is an official UN volunteer program, which you can look for on your websites. And that's an important entry point for working with the UN in a wide variety of fields and countries. And so my time at Cambridge helped me basically to get my first job, because I was learning the language, so to speak, and I was having a bit of exposure. And I was fortunate because I'd studied French as well. I went to Algeria as a junior professional officer with the UN Development Programme, UNDP. And in fact, I had 2 assignments, one in Algeria and then in Chad over a 4-year period. And I was lucky to have those 2 experiences. And I was one of about 60 volunteers who were recruited under this program. And about half a dozen every year went to UNDP, and quite a few went to UNICEF, FAO, UNHCR, and other agencies. And then after my period as a volunteer, I applied for a longer term job, and I was fortunate to be among the 30 former volunteers who were able to be engaged for a longer term career. And over a 30-year period, I had assignments, first of all, in Algeria and Chad as a volunteer, and then in Haiti, in Guyana, in Congo, Brazzaville, then in Mauritania. Then I went back to Congo, and then to Saudi Arabia, Eritrea, Equatorial Guinea. And there's quite a good mixture of English speaking, French speaking, Spanish speaking. And a lot of them are more of the so-called hardship stations, least developed countries. And it was all good exposure. But I also had 3 assignments in headquarters, one in the Latin America Bureau, another in the Europe and the former CIS Bureau, and the other in the Evaluation Bureau. And during the course of my career, I had 4 postings as a deputy resident representative for UNDP, and then 2 as resident coordinator and UNDP Res Rep, as well as a head of a mission in Eritrea and a representative for the Department for Humanitarian Affairs. So basically 3 head of mission postings. And then in 1998, I took early retirement. I'd done my 30 years and then served for a couple of years as executive director of a large NGO in Nepal called the United Mission to Nepal, which brought together about 35 different, actually Christian NGOs working in development from 18 countries. So it was a sort of mini UN, and I felt I was able to contribute. Trouble is, I had to return to the UK a bit early for family reasons from 2000 up to 1999 to 2000. And as Anya said, I then started on a consultancy route and did 4 or 5 consultancies every year till about 2017, and went to about 40 different assignments in about 30 countries. So, and that relates to UN coordination, planning, monitoring, evaluation, all sorts of things. And it was all fascinating, and I was able to use my past experience. So there's a little nutshell of my past UN experience. And then the second question for you guys is, why is it important that young people get involved in international affairs, and particularly the UN? Now, over the last few years, you would have heard about Britain getting bigger or Britain getting smaller, and we hear a lot about being in global Britain. In my view, Britain, in fact, has reduced its chances of playing the type of leadership role it has traditionally had. in international organizations, and particularly through its soft power. And we've lost a lot of that role in the UN and the EU, largely through Brexit, in my opinion, as well as budget cuts in the aid program. But we are where we are, but there is still scope and a need for Britain to punch above its weight and to be able to play a role and be a leader, as it always has been. But there are many players, of course. But looking at a website a couple of years ago, I came upon a quote from the British government. And the British government says there is a vital need for good Brits to join the UN. And of course, in Britain, there are lots of different people from all sorts of backgrounds. So it is a very broad net. This website said the UK wants international organizations to have strong leadership structures that are able to shape effective and efficient organizations. We support merit-based recruitment to ensure that positions are filled by talented individuals. We want to see strong British candidates applying for and taking up key roles within these organizations to join the many who are already working there. The government is keen to ensure British nationals with the right skills and experience are aware of the career opportunities that international organizations offer. Building an accurate picture of interest and available talent will also help us to identify the best candidates for appointments. International organizations have their own recruitment websites where you can find information on the latest vacancies, the application process, the remuneration packages, and more on working for these organizations. So I would strongly urge all of you guys who are interested potentially in an international career not to lose heart, but to continue to learn about that wider world, a global world, and to become involved in providing solutions at whatever age you are, because there is a need. We need solutions to the critical issues faced in terms of security. They're on the front page the whole time, aren't they? About sustainability when it comes to sustainable development goals, about climate change. I think you guys have heard that word many times, that term, as well as humanitarian affairs, refugees, disasters all over. There is huge scope, there is huge need. There is a need for good international organizations and not just the bilateral ones. And the UN system actually has a network which tries to address the challenges. It's got about 20 specialized agencies and many other related organizations. And each one has a mandate to promote international norms of behavior, as well as to provide support to member countries. And there's a wide range of non-governmental organizations, NGOs, also with an important role in humanitarian affairs and advocacy work, which also need to work with the UN. So there is a huge scope. And all of these need good staff to run them. And while there is always strong competition for each post, and even more so than when I joined, the key challenge is to prepare for them and then to apply. So the third point, which Anya asked me to address, is how you can start preparing for a UN career at a young age, and including before university. So I imagine, unfortunately, I can't see you, that you're secondary school, preparing for A-levels, and you're wondering what A-levels to take. You may have chosen them already. But I've got 10 suggestions just to point you in your way. So you can take note of them as I go through with your pens, but I've got also this talk printed out, and Anya is going to send it out with 6 other documents, which I will describe later. So the first suggestion, which can help you, I believe, to prepare for a UN career, is to find out which UN agencies might be able to employ you. So regardless of your A-level subjects, have a look at websites of UN agencies and learn about what they're doing, the type of mandates they have, and the career opportunities offered. These cover more or less any subject from A, animal husbandry, to Z, zoology, and everything in between. There is scope somewhere for every single subject. It's a question of finding out how and where, and sometimes, of course, the age and the expertise counts. They're not always entry-level positions. So the second suggestion is to study potential research topics in A-level subjects. So whatever you're going to do in your A-levels, somehow think of a potential paper or dissertation or an essay, which might be helpful. You can show people that you've actually looked into in more depth an international relations type of subject. So whether it's a language or whether it's economics or whether it's politics or anything under the sun, somehow see how you can apply it by actually doing a paper potentially as a thesis, as an essay. And you can bring that out in an interview and you can say, hey, this is what I wrote. And this will be a very good test. The third point I would suggest is join clubs and societies in your school. Join the types of clubs and societies which might have relevance to international affairs and try to obtain positions of responsibility on their committees, for instance, chair or vice chair or secretary or organizational events or social secretary, whatever. Anything which gives you some sort of responsibility in organizing a group, which then has an entry point into some sort of international subject. This is all good experience. The fourth point I would say is very useful is public speaking. Find out, seek opportunities to speak on topics of interest. Once you've done your little paper, speak about it, whether it's a group of 2, whether groups of 10, or it's the whole school. Seek those opportunities to speak out and to learn about a topic of interest. And this will enable you to do some research on the subject, to make presentations, including with PowerPoints, which is very important, and to develop those public speaking and debating skills and building up confidence. And all of these are good for your CV. The fifth point, we're halfway through, is to make sure that you read widely. These days, in my experience, even my kids, they don't read very much. Sometimes on the phone, yes, but I think it's terribly important, regardless of where you read it, but read newspapers, and particularly the broadsheets. I don't want to promote any one particular one, but I'm a fan of The Guardian. The Times is good. Telegraph has lots of articles, but there are also quality weeklies like The Economist, The New Statesman, The Spectator. Also read more specialist magazines from international think tanks. Chatham House has many events and papers, the Overseas Development Institute, and there are lots more. But make sure you pursue your subject of interest, find out more, read what's happening, and read widely. The sixth point I would suggest is find opportunities to travel abroad. Take every opportunity to move out of your comfort zone in this country. Try and work abroad. Try and go for short visits, even holidays, in any range of paid or unpaid jobs. And while try and seek to learn more about the history, the culture, the socio-economic situation of each country. And this will broaden your mind. Seventh, when you leave school, try and do a gap year. I know this is sometimes controversial, it's not always possible, but in my experience, I had a gap year and I traveled in Turkey and I also did languages in France. So this is all good exposure. So if possible, try and do a gap year. It'll give you extra maturity, one would hope, and broaden your horizon. And that will help you to gain positive experience in other countries and try and write out records for potential future use. Write diaries, write papers, do all these sort of things, capture what you learned. An eighth point is try and get a hang of a language or more. Seek every opportunity to learn a language or two. Not only does it help in communicating with colleagues of other nationalities, but it also opens one's own mind to other cultures and suggests a more open and less insular frame of mind. Unfortunately, as you know, with English being the major global language in international organizations, the fact of the matter that most people speak English. Therefore, UK nationals may have less incentive to learn other languages. However, it should be noted that most well-qualified candidates who you'll be competing against from other nationalities may already be fluent in several languages, in addition to their mother tongue. And that is a significant challenge. So when I was abroad, I was in Turkey, I learned quite a lot of Turkish. I went to France, I learned pretty good French. Later on, I learned Spanish, and I was able to work in English-speaking countries, French-speaking countries, and Spanish-speaking countries, and these all helped. The ninth point I would suggest is that you may be trying to go to university now, but think from now that you'll have to do a postgraduate. Postgraduate studies are normally a sine qua non for entry into international organizations. Otherwise, they won't even look at you. And this includes the UN. Bear this in mind from the very beginning and work towards this goal to obtain relevant postgrad qualifications after your undergrad studies, including through the choice of research and dissertation topics. So your studies won't just be 3 years, there'll be a bit more, I'm sure. And then number 10, internships. Internships can be very good entry points, though no guarantee of longer term employment. But even if you may have to pay for it, an internship in a UN organization between your graduate and postgrad studies is normally a valuable way of gaining hands-on experience in a UN office or in a UN project. And it also gives an opportunity to get to know people. And most UN agencies have internships. If you look at all these websites, you'll find them. Though, as I said, not always on a paid basis. So check the websites for opportunities. So those are my 10 points. But when I was talking to my wife just earlier, she said, well, there's an 11th one. Choose the right spouse. If you want to have an international career, there are all sorts of hiccups, and it's not always easy to get the right spouse. Sometimes careers are short because in this day and age, most spouses work. And this can be a challenge in itself. So it's just an 11th, rather practical, important point, and one has to think about the personal side in the longer term, children, education, all that sort of thing, but one step at a time. So now, unfortunately, as I said, I won't be able to talk to any of you in person or socialize, but I have an email, and if anybody wants to write to me and ask a few questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we've already had a few questions rolling in.
Good.
So the first
Okay.
question.
Right, can I just say, Emily's going to send me these 7 documents and they're listed there and you'll get them into due course. Okay, so any questions, guys?
We'll send them out to the students after the workshops end. So the first question was, how do you feel like your extensive experience in international affairs has helped you grow throughout your career, both professionally and maybe personally?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that. Anya, could you repeat?
Of course, yeah, no worries. So how do you feel like your time at the UN for so many years has helped you grow throughout your career, both professionally and in terms of like personal development?
Well, I feel that I've had a very broad experience in lots of different countries. And most people have to go on holiday to go to the types of countries. And a lot of the countries are not the places you'd visit on holiday anyway. So I have been very privileged to work with governments and nationals of lots of different countries. So professionally, we've had an important job to do to try and mold an aid program and get the right people working with government to make a difference. So it's always been a challenge professionally. And then on the personal level, we've met a fascinating number of people in all sorts of areas and places. And I have definitely been enriched by all this experience.
Definitely. And another actually rather interesting question that we got was, where do you envisage the UN to be in the next 50 years? Where do you see the UN and its role in the world in the next 50 years?
Sorry, once again, I didn't hear. Is the role of the UN in the next 50 years?
Yes, how do you see that evolving?
It's a good point. Unfortunately, at the moment, the UN is not as strong as it should be, because there have been tendencies for countries to do their own thing and to go bilateral instead of multilateral. The US is the prime example in the last administration, and the UK has also been following that route. But having said that, in world affairs, there are always pendulums. And I believe that the role of multilateral organizations will increase because they have to increase. I think we've seen just the Afghanistan situation, the Syria situation, all over the place. Countries need to work together. And if they don't, we'll all suffer. So I am optimistic that the UN will still be there in 50 years. It'll have a different role and it may require different skill sets, but I still believe there is a role for it And unlike with the League of Nations before the Second World War, which was snuffed out, you could say, because of war, the UN, I think, should still carry on. I don't know if it'll change its name, but it's already survived 70 years, which is pretty good. So I'm optimistic that it'll carry on and it'll continue to need people who are able to man it, but also to keep some of these governments under control, and also to serve governments so that they see the interest of using the UN and multilateral organizations.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
definitely. Yeah, I
Okay.
can. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the talk, Michael. I think that was really insightful. That was definitely going to be very helpful for students who do wish to start or who do wish to consider a career in the UN going forward. I see that we already have our next speaker here with us. So thank you so much once again, Michael. It was really interesting to hear from you. We'll be sending out the documents and the resources that he sent to the students shortly once the workshops end. So Dr. Emily, are you here?
Yes,
Hi.
I'm here.
Hi, so I'm just going to quickly introduce our next speaker. Coming to our last session for today, we have a workshop on admissions to Cambridge. We know that many of the students here are considering applying to Cambridge, or maybe have already started applying, and that's why we hope this session is going to be useful for you. I'm very delighted to announce that we have Dr. Emily Tomlinson here with us today. She studied modern and medieval languages at St. Catherine's College in Cambridge and remained there as a graduate student, completing a PhD on literary and cinematic responses to human rights abuse. She went on to become a junior research fellow at Queen's College, and in 2013 took up the post of admissions director at Lucy Cavendish College, moving to Christ's College in 2016. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Dr. Emily. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Anya. Are you happy for me to share my screen?
Yeah, definitely. That should be all right.
Okay. So I will say at the outset, the Cambridge admissions process is complicated. I'm not going to pretend that it isn't. I will try to hit some of the high points in the next 15 minutes, and then I think there should be 5 minutes for questions. Okay, so I will try to share my screen now. Is that sharing? Yes. Okay. Okay, so in the event that you have any questions at the end of this talk that you don't get the chance to ask today, this is my email address. First thing to say, Cambridge admissions offices are well staffed. They are very happy to receive questions. Don't think that you're wasting their time. Please, do reach out if anything occurs to you as you consider whether to apply to Cambridge and to work your way through the process. Okay, so first thing to talk about is, what is Cambridge looking for? Well, it's not rocket science. So we are looking for overall academic ability and potential. So where are you now in terms of your aptitude for high-level study in a particular subject? Where do you have the potential to be in 2 to 3 years' time? Okay, so lots and lots of myths about the fine detail of what makes a Cambridge applicant. Actually, it's primarily we're interested in your brains. Beyond that, you do need to satisfy any specific course requirements. So in some cases, these are pretty obvious. If you want to study history, it helps if you have studied history at the highest level available to you within your school qualification system. If you want to study English literature, it helps if you've studied English literature and language to the highest available level. Sometimes they're a little bit less obvious. So if you want to study medicine, the critical subject is actually chemistry rather than biology. And for a lot of our courses, there are actually no subject requirements at all. So law, which is probably of interest to quite a number of you here, is a subject that's accessible to you with any combination of higher level subjects. So people come to law with a background in the sciences and with a background in the social sciences. But regardless of what course you're applying for, what we want to see is genuine subject interest. So one of the things I'm going to be saying again and again in terms of a tip is, you need to demonstrate the things that you know that we are looking for. So are you genuinely curious, motivated, enthusiastic about the course that you want to study? Now, that is particularly important. It's important for all leading universities. It's particularly important for Cambridge. So just to illustrate this, so I used to be a lecturer at the University of London. I had an attendance register, and at the start of all my lectures, I would have to check off which students were there, because attending a certain number of lectures was a condition for passing the course. That isn't the case at Cambridge. Okay, so if you do not want to get out of bed on a cold December morning and rush to your 9 o'clock lecture in material science, no one is going to make you. You may regret it when you get to the exam, but along the way you have to be the one who kind of drives yourself through, and also you have to be prepared for quite a lot of independent studies. So we are looking for those qualities in the application process. We want to know that you've thought about the course that you're applying for, and that you've thought about the teaching style and the assessment style at Cambridge. Is it right for you? So the kind of jewel in the crown of the Oxbridge education system is small group teaching. So Oxford calls that tutorials, we call it supervision. So this is learning by dialogue, effectively. You might be in a group of 2 or 3 students with an academic, with a supervisor, working through essays or scientific problems that you have prepared in advance. So we want to know that you enjoy, that you would shine, you'd get the most out of this kind of teaching setup. And the interview in a way is designed to replicate a supervision. And it has to be said, we also want to know, are you good at exams? So, Cambridge is varying the ways it assesses its students, but, other universities will assess students on group presentations, on teamwork. Most of our assessment is still concentrated on your performance in written assessment under timed conditions. So we're looking to see, are you good at exams? We are looking for work ethic. So, Cambridge is I'm not going to lie, and many students will back this up. The workload is heavy, the pace is fast compared with other UK universities. You get used to it. It can be a bit of a culture shock in the first term. People do adapt, but it's worth being aware of and knowing that we'll be looking for that in our admissions process. The other thing that we are looking for in medicine and veterinary medicine is vocational commitment. Do you understand the reality of the career to which this degree is going to lead you? But all of these are essentially academic attributes. So what I want to stress is that we're looking for the brightest, the best students, except in medicine, where we have quotas imposed by the government, and we don't have targets or quotas for students from particular countries. So if you are one of the top candidates in your subject, you will be offered a place regardless of how many other candidates there are from your country or even from your school. So that's not something to be concerned about. Our offers are needs blind. So there are considerations in terms of funding once you've secured an offer from us, but we don't take into account your ability to pay when we're thinking about whether to give you an offer or not. And what comes as quite a surprise to a number of students, particularly those looking at the US as well, is that we're not interested in extracurriculars. So we're not interested in non-academic achievement. If you are an Olympic basketball player, that is great, and by all means mention that to us. But we will not choose you over a candidate who is better academically equipped for our course, but not so good at basketball. So what information do we take into account? Well, information that we take into account, you don't have to put a huge effort into providing. So we are very evidence driven, and essentially we will use as much evidence as you can give us, but a lot of this is factual. So we'll look at your school transcript if you have not done GCSEs. So if you've done GCSEs, we'll look at your performance at GCSE level. If you haven't done GCSEs, we'll look at your school transcript, your performance at school over the last 3 years. What qualifications have you achieved? What are you predicted to achieve? We'll look at supracurricular attainment. So that's supracurricular attainment is our word essentially for things that you have done outside the classroom, which are directly related to the subject that you want to study, but that you have done independently beyond the school curriculum. So actually that might be Model United Nations if you're applying for a subject like human, social and political sciences. It might be, if you're interested in maths, it might be maths contests. If you're a lawyer, it might be something like mooting or debating. So it might actually just be things that you have read. So, reading is key to many, many Cambridge degrees. best advice I can give you is I have had students say this to me in an interview, I say, what's the last book you read? And they say, I don't really like reading. So a top tip there is, bear in mind that most Cambridge degrees involve reading. We look at your personal statement, so the statement that you write about your course interest and your aptitude for the course at UCAS, which is the Central University's application portal. And we also ask for information about your interests in the supplementary application questionnaire. So this is a questionnaire that gives you a chance to tell us a little bit about your interest in the Cambridge course specifically. We look at your reference. We look at, in some subjects, essays that you might have submitted that you've written at school. In some subjects, we have admissions assessments, so either pre-interview or at-interview tests. We'll look at contextual information, so have you had to overcome particular challenges to perform at the level that you are? And we'll look at your scores at interview. So it's important to bear in mind that we don't look at any element in isolation. Okay, so we look at all the evidence together. We estimate that every successful applicant to Cambridge has had 16 hours of staff time spent on their application. So a great deal of thought goes into every offer. And, it's not like a job where essentially when you get through each stage of the filtering process, the culmination of the process is the interview. And if you blow it out of the ballpark in the interview, that's it, you're in. At Cambridge, we will take your interview scores, usually from 2 interviews, and look at them alongside other evidence. And the interview is not generally the final hurdle. So in brief, this is the application cycle. Key things to say is that the Cambridge deadline is earlier than the deadline for other UK universities. It's the 15th of October. Your school, your guidance counsellor will undoubtedly want you to have your application ready to go before that, because they're going to be writing your reference. We estimate that we make about 1 in 5 of our applicants an offer. It does vary a little bit by subject. I've been asked to give a few tips about certain key elements of the process. So I will start with a personal statement. Everything I have to say here is pretty obvious. Be honest, be yourself, write with integrity. Be aware that if you mention something in your personal statement, we might ask you about it at interview. So if you say in your personal statement that you have recently read the complete works of Shakespeare, you can anticipate that I may ask you about, Act 3 in Romeo and Juliet. You don't need to be original. We see lots of quotes. We see lots of people trying to make themselves stand out. Worst personal statements I've ever read was one written by an applicant for law, as though he was a prisoner at the bar being tried, and it started with "my lord." Plea to the judge. I've also seen a statement as a poem. I remember those statements, but not in a good way. So just be yourself. And think about what other universities that you're applying to would like to see. I mean, I've moved on from that slide, but do look at the requirements any other UK university you're applying to, because for a lot of them, the personal statement will be more of a deal breaker than it will be for us. Somewhere like the LSE takes the personal statement very, very seriously within their admissions process. We look at it alongside other evidence. Pre-interview assessments. So a small number of subjects will ask you to sit a test, usually in school, although within the context of the pandemic, we've had to make some other arrangements for some candidates. But usually you would be sitting an assessment in school if you're applying for largely quantitative subjects. So English and land economy have pre-interview tests too, but essentially it's medicine, natural sciences, engineering, computer science, and I think, well, you can see the list. So things to bear in mind: you need to be pre-registered by your school for the assessment, and you should practice. So all of these tests are testing knowledge, which you should have if you have studied relevant sciences and quantitative subjects to not GCSE to AS level standards. So they're not asking you to have studied a huge amount beyond your school curriculum, but they are asking you to work with that knowledge at quite a fast pace. And they are multiple choice in format. So if you're not used to doing multiple choice questionnaires, and particularly if you're not used to doing multiple choice questionnaires at speed, it's definitely worth downloading some past papers and practicing. Other subjects have what would normally be an at-interview test. Within the pandemic, we haven't been inviting people to interview in person. These have been take-home tests. We email them to you, you do them at home and you submit them back. Again, you can find examples online, and we consider that you don't need to register for those, and we consider the results from those tests in tandem with interview scores. So moving on to interviews, usually, so there's one specific scheme where if you're in a country which is more than 7 hours out in terms of time zone, you can ask to be interviewed by a different team at an earlier point in the autumn. Usually, though, you'd be interviewed during the first 3 weeks of December. Interviews, so different colleges do slightly different things. So most can have between 35 and 50 minutes total contact time. That might be one long interview, it might be 2 interviews. Some colleges do 3 interviews. Lecturers conduct the interviews. This year they're going to be entirely online for students both from the UK and other countries. Our interviews are academic, they are subject focused, and often they will be task based. Okay, so you won't be asked to talk in a vacuum, you'll be given a specific problem to engage with. And in fact, often you'll be given some materials, perhaps something to read or some problems to work on in advance of the interview. So 15 minutes or 30 minutes beforehand, and you bring this material that you've looked at into the interview and discuss it there. We're not trying to trip you up. Okay, there's lots of myths in the newspapers about fiendish Oxbridge College interview questions. You know, there's not much truth in them. As I said quite early on in this presentation, our interviews are designed to replicate the supervision system. We are looking at whether you would enjoy learning through dialogue. Interviews are there to help guide you through the problems that they set, and they aren't the final hurdle. We'll consider the scores from them in tandem with other evidence, and if you haven't finished school yet, we'll set you a conditional offer, conditional on you obtaining certain grades. I think that's probably me. I've said enough. Hopefully there's time for a few questions, but I've just put up here a few resources that you can follow up if you're interested. So admissions across criteria, simply we are one of the colleges that take students from the largest number of countries, and I chair the university group that looks at qualifications, different qualifications from around the world. So if you've got a query that you can't get answered elsewhere, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You don't have to be interested in Christ's. Okay, Anya, I'll let you then share any questions that we've got time for.
Thank you so much for that. I'm sure it must be quite helpful, especially as application season is already underway. So we've had a question where someone's asked, could you write about essays that you've written outside of school? For example, if your school doesn't do your desired course at A levels, and could you mention that in your personal statement?
Yeah, that's a really sensible thing to mention in your personal statement, because that's what I would call super curricular attainment, super curricular activity. It's showing that you are interested and engaged enough by this topic to spend your own time working on it, under your own steam.
Great. And we have another question where someone's asked about what they can do to perhaps, prepare for an interview, and if you have any tips for the interview process specifically.
Well, I think the interviews are actually this year, I think interviews online, they have some challenges, but actually there's less to worry about. So practical tips I often give for in-person interviews sound quite boring, but they are things like, wear clothes that you feel comfortable in, wear layers, because actually within Cambridge you can be moving from very warm spaces to very cold spaces quite rapidly, and work out the logistics of getting to your interview carefully, because there's nothing that unnerves people more than being late. Online interviews, again, practical things. Prepare all the practical stuff so that you're not worrying about it. Make sure your laptop is charged, make sure your webcam works, all those kind of things. Refresh your memory as to what's in your personal statement. Refresh your memory about any written work that you have submitted, so that if you're asked about it, you've got things that you can say. There is also a great website that's set up by students that's called Inside Uni. So if you Google Inside Uni collects student testimony about interviews at different colleges in different subjects. So one way to prepare is to go and have a look at that and see what the experience was like for other people who've applied. One question that some students don't anticipate, which I think you should anticipate, is why do you want to study this course? So if there's one question you do prepare, it should probably be that one.
Yeah, definitely. We've also had a few questions that are more, specific to like a few students. So like someone has asked, should their personal statement contain references to any academic writing that they've done?
Yes, I think so, yes.
And we've had someone who said that, the fact that this is a model UN conference, could they mention an experience like this in their personal statement if they're applying for a law degree?
Yes, and in fact, that's not uncommon. So we see quite a lot of prospective lawyers mentioning this kind of conference. Actually, also, it's not just relevant for law. If you're applying for human, social and political sciences, history and politics, even history, there are quite a number of subjects for which this kind of experience would be very valuable.
Mm-hmm. And we also have someone asking, how do interviews tend to work for modern languages? Is there an interview one each for each language?
At most colleges, yes. So you would have, so they would be slightly different depending on if you have already studied the language for which you're applying. So broadly speaking, you'd have one language for each of the two languages you propose to study. But obviously, if you're proposing to study one language from scratch, that interview will not require you to use the language in the same way as an interview for a language that you have studied. Almost all colleges will give you something to read ahead of one of your two or one or both of your modern languages interviews. So anticipate something, perhaps a poem, literary passage, something like that to think about ahead of the interview.
I think we're getting pressed for time, so I think that would be our last question. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. I'm sure it must be extremely helpful for students who have so many questions and who are interested in applying to Cambridge. I'm sure you must be quite busy. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. I'm now going to hand over to Safa and Louisa, if you all are there.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'm Louisa, and it's been my and Safa's absolute honor to serve as your Undersecretaries General for Delegates for this conference. It's been such a pleasure to work with the committee over the past few months, organizing everything, and it's been more than worth all the work for sure. I had the chance to sit in on ECOSOC this weekend, but based on my discussions with the rest of the Secretariat, I think I can speak for all the committees when I say that we've had an incredibly impressive group of delegates this year. It's been so exciting listening to all your debates and negotiations, and I think it bodes super well for our future when I think about, all the big global issues like climate change that our inspiring guest speakers have discussed, that we have such a creative, passionate, and talented new generation of leaders coming up. So on behalf of the whole Secretariat, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to all the delegates who have participated in our conference and, dealt with all the extra complications that go with attending an event like this online. Next year, I'll be taking over the conference as Secretary General, and it would be absolutely amazing to actually get the chance to see some of you back here in person. And I'll pass over to Safa.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, just to follow on from that, thank you so much for attending this conference. I know it's been a bit of a rush for a lot of people, and I've been the main contact for a lot of the advisors. So I want to thank everyone for being really patient. And in organizing all their delegates to come to the conference. I've had the pleasure of being in the UN Human Rights Council today, and it was so inspiring to see so many people with so much knowledge and the ability to debate well in the committee. I'd also like to thank all the chairs for their really hard work in encouraging and facilitating their debate in each of the committees. I know in my committee, the chairs were really inspiring people and they were able to lead the debate and organize it really well. So without further ado, I will be passing on to the chairs who are joining now. We'll start with EcoSoc, and then we'll go on to SOCHUM, and then UNHRC, UNHRC, then WHO, World Health Organization, then NATO, and then historical. So each chair will present the awards for their committees and talk about how their committees have been. So I'm so excited for all of the delegates to be able to receive their awards for their fantastic debates. So without further ado, if the chairs for UNHRC are here, to pass on to them. Yeah, if the chairs of EcoSoc are arriving, please turn your mic on and your camera on when you arrive.
Hi. Hi. Okay. I would like to thank each and every one of you who helped run the conference. It was truly 2 amazing days that I will never forget. And it was also my last MUN conference as a student. So it really meant a lot to me. I would like also to thank my chairs, Megan and Maria, who stepped up to help us when we needed her. And generally, I would like to tell a huge thanks to all of the delegates who were there and were productive and participated a lot and made this conference an enjoyable experience overall. It really was something that it was all productive and everyone participated, and I was really happy for that. So before we move on to the awards, I would like to give special thanks to the secretariats and everyone in the organizational committee who helped run this conference. So now before I go and allow Megan to talk as well, I would like to present 2 awards, which is, first of all, the best speaker, and second of all, an honorable mention. All of the delegates were great. We simply just want to give special thanks to some specifically. So we decided that the honorable mention for the ECOSOC committee goes to Indonesia. So if you're listening it from the live, congratulations, you were amazing. And second of all, we decided that the best speaker award goes to Saudi Arabia. Again, congratulations if you can hear this. And Megan will present the rest of the awards. Again, Megan, thank you very much for your help. You were amazing. You mentored me a lot. And thanks to everyone else.
Right. Thank you, Zoe. So hi, everyone else. My name is Megan. And for the self-explanatory, I'm the other chair of EcoSoc. EcoSoc is a very special committee to me. My MUN career starts with EcoSoc, and now my secondary school MUN journey ends with EcoSoc as well. On this special occasion, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the Secretariat, especially Emily, Tom, Christian, and Louisa. To Emily, thank you for all the hard work in organizing everything as our Secretary General. To Tom, thank you for reminding us that as chairs, we have to be self-disciplined at all times, being role models for delegates. To Christian, thank you for sending 20 plus emails to us, reminding us of the logistics. And to Louisa, thank you for taking care of the Zoom platform and constantly giving a lot of confidence. I would also like to thank my co-chair Zoe and Chris and Maria, who are NATO chairs, for being in a team with me. And I absolutely love the fact that we're supporting one another throughout this journey. I cannot imagine how I will be able to handle everything on my own without you guys. And to all delegates of EcoSoc, it's a pleasure for me to have all of you with me in this conference. And I'm extremely proud of you all. And now on to the awards. The best negotiator, is the delegate who has been diplomatic at all times, willing to take all the delegates' opinions into account, and may submitting a resolution on the topic of the South China Sea issue. Therefore, the best negotiator goes to Matthew Brown, the delegate of Japan. As for the long-awaited best delegate, this delegate has understood the ROP of MUN really well, constantly giving out speeches and answering POIs confidently. And this delegate has also proved to chairs that sufficient research on both topics has been done. Without further ado, it is my honor to announce that the Best Delegate Award goes to Mio Kobayashi, the delegate of El Salvador. Congratulations. As cliche as it sounds, but please don't be discouraged if you didn't receive an award this time, since this is going to be a learning process for all of you. Thank you all, and I hope to see you all in the near future.
Thank you so much to the chairs of EcoSoc. I'd like to hand over to the chairs of SOCUM now, if they'd like to turn on their cameras. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear delegates, fellow chairs, honorable secretariat, organizers and speakers, or listeners. The past 2 days have been full of debate, full of fruitful debate, and full of interesting conversation. My name is Nefeli Garoutou. I am 17 years old and I'm from Athens, Greece. These 2 days have been truly an unforgettable experience for me, as I'm truly interested to go into the field of law and international relations. And I would like to give the floor to my fellow chairs of the Social Humanitarian Committee, as not to take too much of the time, of all of your time.
Thank you, Nefeli. Hi, my name is Olivia, and with my turn, I want to thank Elena, Olivia, and Nefeli for being amazing chairs, helping all the delegates to create beautiful resolutions and also manage a big virtual committee that was very hard. Also, a very big thanks to Christian and Emily for their very helpful guidance. We did have many delegates who weren't experienced and us chairs who weren't very experienced, but still managed to have great debate, as Nefeli said, and have unforgettable experiences. And hopefully for the delegates that are listening now, we hope that we really created the great environment for you to be able to speak and be able to be part of this great experience that MUN is. Thank you. Now, Olivia, you can continue.
Thank you, Olympia. Now it falls upon me to name the awards for this committee. So we're giving the Best Negotiator Award to the delegate of China for showing dedication and diplomacy to resolution writing, especially at the end of a long day of debating on Saturday. This delegate was particularly accommodating of all ideas, making everyone feel comfortable at the conference. The Best Speaker Award goes to the delegate of Turkey for her confidence and her passion at every given moment. Her placard throughout the conference was a pleasure as she fervently advocated for each and every case. And the Best Delegate Award goes to the delegate of Argentina. She was highly knowledgeable in her subject area and consistently raised excellent points related to our two topics on police brutality and female education in sub-Saharan Africa. We are truly proud of every delegate for their hard work. Seeing everyone blossom throughout the conference was a complete pleasure. And thank you.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Elena, and I would just like to express how thankful we all are to the organization and the speakers that all did an incredible job so as to make sure that this conference is as well prepared, fun, and interesting as possible, and it truly was. Also to our excellent delegates that worked so hard and offered so many brilliant ideas. And lastly, I would personally like to thank all the amazing chairs of this committee for being so helpful, kind, sweet, and fun to work with. Thank you so much, guys. I hope I'll see you again.
Thank you. We're now going to move on to the chairs of the UNHRC. So if you guys would like to turn your mics and cameras on and present your awards, that would be great.
Okay, I would just like to make a small speech on behalf of everyone. I just want to say well done to the Secretariat for organizing such an incredible conference. Thank you to my co-chairs for being so helpful and being there throughout the committee. And the delegates, congratulations. You guys did amazing. And I'm so proud of everyone discussing two really controversial topics. You were all so well prepared. And I was really, honestly, I was surprised, if I'm being quite frank. Thank you to Alexia. You were the first, it was your first time chairing and you did amazing. You handled the majority of this day's session, which is amazing. Kyra, Hamaka, same thing. You guys are all amazing. I really hope we get to keep in touch. I had so much fun writing the guides and sharing with you guys and talking about other things. And thank you. Now, with that being said, I would like to yield the floor to my co-chair, Alexia, who will present the awards.
Hi, everyone. Even though I think we as chairs said our thank yous and our congratulations to our delegates before at the end of the session, and I thought it was very sweet, I want to say that again in front of everyone, you truly were amazing. We were a beginner committee and still we saw so many POIs, so many amendments, and so much enjoyment, which made our decision for awards even harder. Now, to not know you, keep you waiting because we know how much you want to know. For the best delegate award goes to Morocco because we saw your excitement and we saw how you always raised your virtual hand to the point where we have to tell you to stop. For the best negotiator, we take it to Netherlands because we saw your POIs always help the conversation and the flow of the debate in really, really good. And we do want to award you with this award. Now for the best speaker, Turkey, because we thought you had the most research and you had a very difficult position because as we said, you had two very touchy subjects and maybe your personal opinion did not touch with the opinion of your country, but yet you kept your role and we want to congratulate you on that. Now, to honorable mentions, I want to give it to China, France, and DPRK because your role into the debate was not forgotten. You were always there, raising your virtual hands, and want to say thank you, and we'd love to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the chairs of UN8LC. I'd like to pass on now to the chairs of NATO.
Good evening, guests of honor, Secretariat, chairs, and delegates. First, I must thank the Secretariat for offering my fellow co-chairs, Maria Apostolos, Chrysanthi, and I the incredible opportunity to serve as chairs in NATO. And we must also thank the delegates too. Over the past 2 days, we have enjoyed fruitful debate from all delegates who have been constantly engaged in the issue at hand.
So in particular, we would like to honor select few who have simply had an exceptional presence throughout the conference and performance, of course. So first, the Best Diplomat Award goes to the delegate who has been enthusiastically giving constructive feedback to the debate at hand, submitting amendments to improve the resolution, and giving POIs that genuinely reflect her concerns. Without further ado, the Best Diplomat Award goes to the delegate of France. Congratulations.
Next, the Best Speaker Award goes to the delegate who was never hesitant to express her opinions, providing ample evidence and justifications during her speeches. This goes to the delegate of the United Kingdom.
Lastly, the Best Delegate Award goes to the delegate who has always been actively engaged in the debate, no matter moderated or not, never forgetting to ask other delegates for their opinions and trying their best to construct a resolution that would provide compromise despite their tricky stance. This goes to the delegate of Ukraine. Congratulations.
So yeah, thank you all for this amazing conference, and we really do wish you all the best going forward. Thank you guys again.
Thank you so much for the speeches. I'd now like to invite the chairs of WHO to speak.
Okay. So, hey everyone. I'm Elias and I was the shadow chair on the WHO committee. On the WHO committee, we actually tried to have a very flowy debate and for everyone to speak, which was very important for us. And we believe that we actually succeeded it. And so I would like to personally thank every delegate for actually being there and participating on the fullest of their possibilities. I would also like to thank my co-chairs, my URI and Jason for actually being great teachers, because was my first time chairing, and actually I understood everything they were doing, and they were very great at what they we're actually planning, right? And also I would like to thank the Secretariat for actually organizing this whole thing and for that, and that it ran very smoothly. And now on the awards, I would like to give the Best Negotiator award to Netherlands because we believed he had the best points and great comebacks, and he was actually very participating on the whole conference. Right. Now I would like to yield my floor to my co-chair Jason to actually continue on with the awards.
Thank you, Ilias. So, Honorable Secretariat, distinguished guests, fellow student officers and their delegates, my name is Jason Patsatsis. I am 16 years old and I'm a student at the German School of Athens. However, before I proceed with the awards, I would like to start by thanking the Secretariat, not only for organizing the conference and for their hard work, but for actually being there and guiding us throughout the whole process. Now, I would also like to thank my co-chairs. Mayuri and Ilias, you guys did excellent. You worked so hard. And I would like to thank you for our communication and chemistry, for screen sharing resolutions when I was bored to do so, and for overall always actually paying attention. So at this point, I would like to move on with thanking the delegates of the WHO committee. No offense to other delegates. However, the delegates in our committee wanted to be there. They weren't forced to be there. They actually wanted to debate. They actually wanted to make draft resolutions. They were always happy to work more and work extra and work harder, which is something that I believe chairs appreciate a lot. So I would like to thank the delegates for that. And if I could give an award to every one of them, I would actually do so. Now I would like to move on with the awards. So the award of the best delegate goes to the delegate of France, so congratulations. And the award for the best speaker goes to the delegate of Russia. Congratulations to all the delegates, because at the end of the day, it's the work that matters, not the award. So the WHO committee yields the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you to the chairs of the WHO. I'd now like to invite the chairs from the Historical Council to speak.
Okay, so esteemed organizing team, distinguished secretariat, fellow student officers, and dear delegates, my name is Panagiotta Dimitrakopoulou, and I'm a student in the German School of Athens. I had the utmost honor of serving as a chair in the Historical Security Council in this year's Cambridge MUN. First of all, I'm going to start with what the delegates are expecting the most. So the awards, I'm going to be presenting the Best Delegate Award, which goes to the Delegate of Russia, and the Best Negotiator Award, which goes to the Delegate of Jordan. Now, after that, I would like to say that this is my second time chairing in Cambridge MUN. I was more than excited. I really wanted the conference to be live and take place on the grounds, but to my pleasure, this conference was not disappointing at all. I would like to give the thanks to my co-chairs, Sixian and Justin, for being there and being very helpful. Other than that, I would also like to thank Tom and Christian, Tom for being such a fun presence in the committee, and Christian for being such a helpful member of the Secretariat. Both of them had interviewed me in both of my interviews, and they really made me feel comfortable and not stressed at all. Other than that, this was a great experience, and I hope to relive it again next year as a university student. And now I would like to pass the floor to my co-chair, Justin.
Sure. So just to elaborate on the awards, but other than the Best Delegate, which goes to Russia, Best Negotiator Award, which goes to Jordan, I'd like to present the Best Speaker Award to a person who gave very inspiring speeches, had very strong rebuttals, comebacks, and shrewd points, which is the delegate of the United Kingdom. Congratulations. So to wrap up my speech here, I just want to quickly say that, as cliche as it might seem, even if you don't get an award, I'd like to try to leave you with a story. It's the importance of diplomacy and the importance of trying to think in the long term. So, for instance, Google's Project Oxygen, which is a research initiative that tries to determine what makes a good manager, reveals that managers not only care about their teams professionally, but also personally. And thus, I think the same thing applies to MUN or life in general. It's really, as cliche as it might seem, the friends you make along the way. It's the connections and the people that you're able to reach out in a very diplomatic manner. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that's what MUN embodies you with, and what it equips you, the skill for you to present your ideas in a diplomatic and peaceful manner. So at the end of the day, I think make sure to fend for yourself, but also defend the right for others to speak. Make sure to be progressive and open to change as a person, but not aggressive and resistant to criticism. With that, thank you so much. And thank you so much for the Secretariat for selecting me to be one of the chairs here at this conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the chairs for their speeches. It's been a really great conference, and I'd like to thank the rest of the Secretariat as well, and especially Emily, the Secretary General, who's worked really, really hard in this conference. Yeah, so I'll pass over to Emily now.
Well, hi everybody. I would like to thank delegates for their amazing participation in the conference over the past 2 days. It is wonderful to see you all show such interest in the United Nations and the global issues we face collectively. You have all worked incredibly hard, and we are beyond grateful for your incredible enthusiasm. Not only have you worked to produce fantastic resolutions and voice your opinions, but you have also listened to and considered the perspective of the opposition, which requires a great deal of empathy. The ability to consider the perspective of others, even when their viewpoints may differ from your own, is crucial to overcoming conflicts and arriving at solutions. Without empathy, negotiations fail, and without successful negotiations, we cannot implement change. Regardless of whether you are interested in a career in international affairs or something entirely different, each and every one of you is an inspiration with an extremely bright future ahead. I think I speak on behalf of the entire Secretariat and the chairs when I say that it has been an honour for us to form part of your MUN journey. Whether this was your first conference or your 20th conference, we would like to sincerely thank you for all being active members of our international community and taking the time to think about issues that for some might seem far away. However, these issues are not far away, and they are not their problems, they are our problems. And I thank you for recognising this. And it is now my privilege to hand over the role of the Secretary General to Luisa Aguilar for CUIMUN HS 2022. I have full confidence that next year's conference will be fantastic, as I know it is in very safe hands. Thank you once again to the Secretariat for their incredibly hard work and continuous support. Thank you to our wonderful chairs who have done such a fantastic job to provide an invaluable experience for delegates. Thank you to our amazing speakers who have undoubtedly inspired every single person listening. And last but not at all least, thank you to the delegates. We truly hope that you have enjoyed the conference and found it a valuable experience, and I wish you the very best of luck for the future. I now declare CUIMUN HS 2021 closed.